There we go.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this City Council meeting to order, March 22nd, 2021. I would like to start, if we all would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States
of the United States of
and to the
America,
republic
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. And of course, my clock got to join in. Sorry about that, everybody. Next on our agenda for this evening is our agenda approval. This is the time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or change in the listed sequence of agenda items. The agenda will be approved by a roll call vote of the council. Do any of the council members have any changes or adjustments they'd like to make to the agenda? Amy, do we have anybody from the public who made comments on the agenda?
We do not.
We do not. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Excellent. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, Amy, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokley.
Yes. Thank you very
I'm not
much.
sure if Gary has a strong feeling about this. We didn't do roll call. Gary, do you want us to do a roll call at this time
I'm sure. I think do a roll call for everyone who's here.
for the
Yes.
meeting? The roll call
Yeah.
for the meeting.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, Amy, please go ahead and do a roll call. My
No
apologies.
problem. Sorry about that. In attendance tonight, Councilmember Berlant,
Well, just like your cat, I am here.
Amara,
Just like Amy's cat, I am here, present.
Dowden Calvillo,
Present with my own cat.
Riddell Harris,
I'm here by myself.
and Mayor Spokley.
And I'm here as well. Thank you, Amy. Sorry for skipping over that. Thank you for keeping us on track here. Next on our agenda, everybody, is our consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussions on these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. I'm going to, before we entertain any of the council members' requests for removal of any of the items, I'm going to ask our city manager to kind of run through and give a brief summary of what items are on our consent calendar. John?
Mayor and Council, item 1 are the minutes from February 22nd and March 8th. Item number 2 is just the December quarterly investment report. You can see the city has a pretty healthy portfolio, but LAIF, where the vast majority of our funds are in, does not perform very well, under 2%. Item number 3 is just an information item to the council from the Pioneer Energy. They had a restructuring of how the treasurer position goes, and just giving that to the council for information. Item number 4 is authorization to go to bid on the surface resurfacing program for the city street maintenance. This is for the surfacing portion of the work alone. It doesn't include the paving amount. Council will note there's about $800,000 in the account for this. Some of it was allocated into the work that is going on as far as fixing all the curb cuts and some of the sidewalks. That's about $200,000. This is estimated about $300,000. The next portion would be the paving portion, and we're gonna see where the bids come in on the resurfacing. So this is just the slurry part of the bid. Item number 5 is a long time coming, but this is the notice of completion for the Cherry Magnolia EV charging stations, high capacity charging right there in downtown. A really good project. Item 6 is declaration of just surplus equipment. There's a whole list of various vehicles and equipment that we are surplusing. And then finally, item number 7. This is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. What this does is it basically enables us to go in and get about $50,000. There's $40,000 that comes from the REAP program, the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program, and then there's $10,000 from the LEAP program, which both of these are housing related. So basically with this MOU, we'll get the grant funding, put it towards housing related projects. So, and that is the consent calendar.
Great, thank you very much, John. I'll go ahead and come back to the council. Do any council members have any items that they'd like to pull off consent? I see Alice's hand, and then Rachel, you'll be next. Alice?
Yes, I know we don't have a really heavy agenda tonight, so I would like to pull items 4 and 5 off the consent, please.
Okay, items 4 and 5. Rachel, you had your hand up second?
Alice covered it.
Okay. All right, seeing no other comments from the council. Amy, do we have any comments on our consent calendar from members of the public?
We do not.
With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion, probably out
I
of.
move that we approve the consent calendar without items 4 and 5.
Perfect.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you very much. Amy, if you would mind a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokely.
Yes. Thank you very much. Next will be item number 4 from our consent calendar, the 2021 street resurfacing project, environmental determination and permission to advertise. Alice, you want to?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple really quick questions on this. I wondered, there were several lists of streets. There were streets from 1819, streets from 1920, and then another block of streets. So we're looking to pave all 3 sets of streets. I just wanted to confirm that's the case. I mean, I know we're going out to advertise, but I'm just wondering about when we actually get down to the paving. Are we looking at the 3 sets?
I'll take a swing at that, and then I'll let John answer. We have, I'm missing half my report here. We have 3 categories that were identified. We have the work, the resurfacing work that's from the 1819 10-year roadway CIP program. We have the resurfacing that's from the 1920 roadway CIP program. And then the last little batch of streets is if funds are available to move forward with those. So those are, if unit costs come in low enough, and with the allocated budget of $314,000, if we can get those streets, we'll add those streets also, or 1 or 2 of the streets, depending on how much, how good the bids come in at. John, I'll let you
Okay.
correct me if I misspoke there.
Yeah, you know what, Mengel's on. Mengel, if you can, why don't you walk through those 3 sets of streets and cover that.
Benjol, sorry, I didn't mean to answer for you.
No problem at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You are absolutely correct. The first 2 sets of streets, the 1819 and the 1920 are the streets we intend to do. And
Great.
depending on pricing, given the market right now, we're not certain. These are just rough estimates that we think we can get this project done under. If it meets that threshold, we'll certainly try to get the additional streets you see there in the 3rd section.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just wanted to get confirmation on that. And then do we have a time frame?
Well, we've got the project set to go out to bid as early as tomorrow, and then hopefully we can then have this done before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so just end of the fiscal year is what we're not targeting summer or I guess it's hard to know. We have to see who we get for bid. So, okay. Thank you very much. That was all that I had, Mr. Mayor.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mitchell? Daniel, actually, I see your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, real quick, and John, I realize you and I had this conversation, but in our budget presentations, both in the transportation fund and gas tax, we identified, or the city staff identified, $800,000 for street overlay. These streets obviously are just resurfacing. John, when do you think, since the item is pulled, when do you think we'll get a plan that actually discusses the overlay streets that are in much greater disrepair than those that are being resurfaced here?
Yeah, you know what, Minjal and I talked about this afternoon, and really the goal is we have 800,000. After we do this bid, we'll see what's left over to go after the paving streets. But also a key project that we're pushing onto the staff is an update of the overall pavement management index to kind of reconcile the existing program with a future going forward program. So we will be doing paving streets this year with the balance of the funds that we have, but then in next fiscal year, we will put together our pavement management index that will correlate into a new plan that will come back to this council.
So just to be clear, there's no plan to do any overlay work until next fiscal year?
No.
Is that until after the updated plan is created?
No, there are some streets that are in the plan for overlay. We're waiting for the end of this bid for the slurry resurfacing. Whatever's left over from that, we will put towards the paving projects. So expect that we'll bring this back sometime in the next couple of months for the paving projects.
And just one last question, since you kind of brought it up, and I guess I've never seen us go out to do surfacing and overlay separately. Is there no benefit for us to put out both resurfacing and overlay projects together? I realize that they have different scope of works, but do we get a better deal, or are they completely different? Different services being provided, and so they have to be done separate bids.
Yeah, basically 2 different companies do that. Paving companies don't necessarily do the slurry. So the idea that we're targeting, this is basically standard spec slurries on things. The difference is paving contractors will do slurry, but slurry typically don't do paving. So all you get is built-in profit from the paving company if they try and do both. So we'll go take this thing out to bid and come back with what's left over to do the paving work.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions. I do have a comment I'll reserve till the end.
Great, thank you very much. Councilwoman Amara?
Yeah, just a quick clarification, Minjal. You had a timeline, and it looks like tentatively work is to begin in May and finish in August. I know you won't be held to that, but that's on page 23.
So, thanks for questions, council member. Ideally, if everything goes according to plan, we would hope to have it done before August. This is just a rough estimate to give us enough time to get the notice of completion back to council and wrap up the job in its entirety.
Good. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so much.
So Minjal, I've got a couple of quick questions for you. You and I had a nice conversation in City Hall a few weeks back about this, and what for the rest of the council, what coordination are we doing with Placer County to try to take advantage of economies of scale, piggybacking on the bids that they're doing? Is this one of them, or is that more focused on the street overlay work? Where are we at with our coordination with Placer County on this stuff?
So initially, this project was going to be one of the projects that we would coordinate with Placer County, but there were some initial concerns that because of the SB1 funding, that kind of coordination wouldn't necessarily meet what was required for the fund usage. So in an effort, and that's not to say that it wouldn't have, but in an effort to be absolutely certain, the city decided to pull back from that contract with this particular portion of work and go out to bid on our own, just to ensure that we're doing things legally.
And yeah, I'll follow on to that. There are a couple of coordination agreements with Placer County that we need to get in place, and just in order to line everything up moving forward, we will make sure everything is lined up to do precisely that in the future. But at the present time, we just don't have those agreements in place right now. But we will get there.
Okay, that's, I guess I understand that. I thought we had done this in the past, so maybe we're just being cautious and making sure we're doing it correctly. So thank you for that. The PMI update, we're working off a plan that's nearly now 10 years old. The PMI is probably roughly that same vintage. What's our schedule, Menjel, for getting out there and doing new surveys of pavement condition on the 90+ centerline miles that we have here in the city?
That's actually something, thanks for the question again, Mayor Spokely. That's actually something that staff is aggressively working to get put together as we speak. I mean, the reality is that the 10-year roads report is somewhat outdated because we weren't able to stick to it because of a variety of factors. So now what we need to do is actually get a pavement index that actually matches what's out there in the city, and we're working to get that done. And hopefully once that's in place, we can actually get a plan together that we can stick to and actually aggressively get some of this work in place.
Perfect.
Mr. Mayor, to that end, could both Councilwoman Riddell Harris and myself get a copy of that 10-year plan or a link to it?
I believe.
Oh, absolutely.
I believe it's on our website. Maybe Amy can take a look and see if it is. I think I've found it there on a couple of different occasions, but we can get you a link to it for sure.
Thank you.
And then I guess the last question I had, because of the age of the PMI index that's in the roadway CIP, if we go out and we notice on some of these streets that we've listed, Menjel, from the 1819 resurfacing and 1920 resurfacing, if they're now in a position where they've fallen apart to the extent that they're not really eligible for resurfacing, how is that going to be handled? Are we going to pull those off and flip them over to the overlay bracket? What's the game plan there? Because I know after driving some of these streets over the weekend that some of them look to me to be in bad enough shape that probably resurfacing doesn't make a ton of sense. Has there been recent looks by you or somebody on your staff, Menjel, to kind of evaluate that? Are we going to wait until we get a contractor on board to go look at it with them?
So that's a great question. Again, some of these streets are beyond just the surface, and that's why some of them will receive a Cape seal as opposed to just a slurry. And those are the streets that are still able to be saved. The beauty of this latest group of streets that we're bringing to you is that they're the ones that were anticipated to go last year and this year. So they're not too far gone where an overlay is absolutely required, but a Cape seal could certainly save their life and give them a longer, road life. But yeah, the ones that are not, that you didn't see from previous years, 17, 18, that required this, we didn't bring it because at this point, staff recognized that an overlay is probably in benefit as opposed to just a surface treatment.
Great, thank you very much, Menjel. Any other questions for staff on this item? All right, seeing none. Amy, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, I know that a few of us have comments. I think, Daniel, you mentioned first that you had some comments, so I'll come back to you for comments on this.
Well, I don't want to steal your primary focus because you have been beating this drum the loudest in the 7 years we have been on the council, but I know there's some change in staff, and I would just once again put it on the record that I assume Matt, Mr. Mayor, you as two, and the rest, we have to have a plan in place because it's hard for the public to understand why we're resurfacing what appears to be a good road when we're leaving other roads that have major potholes. And I get it, we want to save those because the prevention of those streets it costs us far less. However, I'm still a little bit confused as why we're not spending the full amount of money that we've appropriated in this year's budget to do that work. And so again, I say those comments, I've had a good conversation with John about kind of the bigger picture, and I know we can't necessarily turn the Titanic around, and by no means do my comments diminish the hard work, Menjo, you have been putting into this project for the last couple of years. But I want us to be a little bit more strategic in this plan. And I'll just leave it there because like I said, Mr. Mayor, this is definitely your issue, but I support your effort to have us work with the county that we've talked about for 7 years, to really be more strategic in our planning opportunities so that we are getting caught up. Because really this road report, it doesn't even identify every single road being overlaid or resurfacing. And so there are streets on here, there are streets in our city that are well in need of some level of care, and they're not even in the 20 report, which I did send, I had it open, so I sent it to Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo and Riddell Harris, just so you have it for this discussion. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the time, and again, support whatever comments you make as well on this issue, because this is one that we just keep, I'll use the example we said over the weekend, we just keep kicking the can down the road.
Thank you very much, Councilman. I appreciate it. Any other comments before I share my Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo?
Yes, and I just want to reiterate that. I mean, clearly we've been kicking this can down the road for 20 plus years, because I was on the council in '98 and we were still talking about resurfacing and some of these streets. And so I do look forward to some additional planning that we can do to ensure that our streets are in good shape. It's not just a matter of convenience. It's really a health and safety issue also, because the roads become too impassable, then it's difficult for our public safety apparatus to drive on them as well. So looking forward to the additional planning and just moving forward on this in general. Our streets really need some work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council? I'll go ahead and wrap up then. Menjo, again, thank you for your efforts. You've heard me, beating this drum, as Councilmember Berlant mentioned, for years now. We need to develop a program and stick to the program. I will thank you for taking all of the resurfacing streets for each of those calendar years, 18, 19, and 19, 20, and including all of them. Usually what we end up with is kind of partial lists, and it takes me a lot of time to go through the roadway maintenance CIP and say, okay, we're doing that one. That one's from 2013. This is one from 2015. So I like the fact that we've at least got the complete list for the resurfacing for each of those 2 calendar years. So thank you for that. The coordination, we've talked about this before, Menjo. We need to do get whatever agreements need to be in place so that we can take advantage of the hugely significant amount of roadway maintenance dollars that the county invests in the county. Because I do think that we can realize some pretty substantial unit cost reductions if we're able to do that. So let's do whatever we need to do to make sure that we're ready to take advantage of that when we start off with our resurfacing, or excuse me, our overlay work. And I'm very excited to hear that we're actually going to update this plan. Again, we've been talking about this for a few years now, but we're going to update this plan, update our PMI, because it's definitely different than it was 10 or more years ago when it was done initially, and get a plan that we follow. So thank you, Menjo, for all your hard work. I appreciate it. John, thank you for your time and kind of explaining some of the, answering some of the questions that I also had. You covered those in your preamble on the overall consent calendar, so I do appreciate that. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I move we approve the 2021 street resurfacing project, the environmental determination and permission to advertise.
I'll second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Any other questions from the council? Amy, would you please call roll?
Sure. Councilmember Brilliant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Stokely.
Yes. Thank you very much, Minjel. Appreciate the report. Good luck on your bid.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Next item on our agenda is public comment. This is a time provided so that the public may speak to the council on.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, we had consent item number 5. We pulled that off.
I'm
consent,
sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. That's mistake strike number 2 for this evening. So I'm on a short list here. Okay, item number 5, notice to completion Placer County Air Pollution District Clean Air Grant for EV charging stations. Alice, you
Yes.
pulled this one as well?
I did, and I know that Councilwoman Riddell Harris had a couple points also. First of all, glad to see this is coming to an end, that we're finishing this up. But I just had a couple of questions. You know, this was a project that was approved prior to my appointment to the council. So I just was wondering, did we know that the cost was going to be $98,000 on the onset, and we were only able to get a grant of $56,000? Is that, or were there additional costs that we accrued during the process?
Thanks for the question again. We knew that the cost was going to be $98,000. The city was responsible to cover 40% of the grant,
I see.
regardless
Okay,
of whatever the cost was. Yes.
okay, so that was a part of the grant to have that 40%. And then now this is the charging station that will function similar to the one behind City Hall, where we'll be providing electricity for free. Is that correct?
It's
Or is it
functioning like the
person-
one behind City Hall. It is going to be a paid charging station.
It's a paid charging station. Okay, thank you very much, because I did not know that it was paid. Okay, good. And all right, well, that was really the only questions I had, was whether or not it was gonna, if it was a paid station. And then do we have any plans, or has there been discussion about any additional charging stations? I thought I heard something about some charging stations at the wastewater treatment plant.
That's another great question. These are all things that we're actively working on and we're actually really excited about. The Moyer Grant Program, which is the program that funded this original project, is set to open on April 1st. With that grant program, the city is hoping to actually bring some more charging stations throughout the city. Maybe add an additional one at the Cherry Magnolia lot, just because this is a DC fast charge. So what this allows is someone to go from 0 battery power to 100% battery power in less than 30 minutes. So
Wow.
we think this is going to be a great way of getting people to stop in Auburn as they're traveling north and south of us, or I should say east and west of us. So with the Moyer Grant Program reopening on April 1st, council can expect to see staff bringing something additional to the table for this. And there is also plans to put DC fast chargers at the wastewater treatment plant, as staff is intending to bring to council the idea of transitioning our fleet to more clean energy vehicles.
Great. Okay, well, great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Are we going to do a little ribbon cutting ceremony there? We should plan something for the first plug-in. That'd be fun.
We'll let the city managers deal with that. That's out of my realm of expertise.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great,
No
thank
problem.
you. Councilwoman Riddell Harris, did you have comments or questions?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Mhm.
So first off, I'm very excited about this. I've had lots of residents ask me about when we're going to be putting in new chargers. So this is a great thing. I had a couple questions about logistics for this particular charger. Since this is what I do all day, I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds. Do we have signage that's going from the freeway to the chargers? That way people know where they're going if they're trying to stop on their way through Auburn to charge? Is that part of the plan? Because it's not exactly right off the freeway, so I just wanted to make sure that people have the ability to get to it.
It will be now.
Okay. It's not as easy to find a charger as some people think. It is on apps, but sometimes if you have to weave around some roads, it's not very easy to find.
No, that's a fantastic point because this is a learning curve for staff as well too. This is our first DC fast charge. So that's something we never considered. And the fact that you kind of gave that direction out actually makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and there are standard signage for EV chargers that you can find that kind of give directional signs, and most EV owners recognize that, just like a gas station sign off the freeway.
Perfect.
Have you guys determined the cost for charging yet?
Yeah, so as you may know, the charger actually went fully functional at the beginning of, when was that? Last week, I want to say. So what we're doing is 25 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
And after every hour, just to encourage people to move on, what we're doing is 10 cents per minute, which equates to $6 per hour. So if you're just parked in the spot and not charging, you're still being charged just to move your car, let someone else get an opportunity to charge.
Yeah, these chargers are pretty fast, but they're not quite to a gas station yet. So most people spend about 20 minutes in them. So I like that that's moving people along. Do we own the equipment? Are we paying the electric bill, or is it a third party that owns the equipment?
The equipment is 100% owned by the city.
Okay. Then I won't get in the weeds now, but I want to talk about LCFS credits later, but that's very much a nerdy in the weeds thing.
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk about it.
And then the last thing is you were talking about fleet conversion. There's a lot of regulatory things going into place that California Air Resources is doing around fleets, and they're going to be mandatory for people for cities, public agencies to convert a certain percentage of their fleet over to zero carbon in the not so distant future. So I was wondering if the city could make sure that we have a plan for that, as well as a plan for charging, because we're going to have both our residents and people driving through town wanting to do this charging. And the more we plan ahead, the cheaper it is for us to do this long term. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not just installing them, one at a time and thinking about one at each moment, but rather coming up with a long-term plan of what we'd like to do for charging. So that way we can install maybe more conduit in a parking lot to start out with, and then we don't have to buy all the chargers now, but it costs I think it decreased the cost by 80% if you put the conduit all in together versus putting in a new charger each time. So just wanted to put that in there as food for thought.
Absolutely. And you'll be excited to know that part of the capital improvement program that council will be reviewing soon, these are all things that staff has been thinking about, and you should see a green energy movement in that, and that's going to help us move in exactly the direction you're talking about.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I might add, the Cherry Magnolia charging station is on Charge Hub, so it's already mapped and it's right there.
Great.
I was just going to mention that because I pulled the app up and it's there. It's nice to see it live already. A couple more questions here. I see Councilwoman Amara's hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Spokley. And thank you, Menjol. I really like the location. It's a great location. And if Lincoln Way should go one way, it'll brings people right by that location. So that's wonderful. Also, I have a very elementary question. And my question is, can all cars be charged? So if I know, like Teslas, are they able to be charged there? Because I know Teslas have their own station. Matt would know more.
Yeah. Tesla vehicles do have a proprietary plug, but they have most Tesla users have an adapter that they use, and they can certainly plug into this charger.
Okay. And what about the plugs for, that has the 3-prong, the car, like the Nissan electric?
So this is the standard. This is the industry standard charger plug that's on this particular machine. So just your run-of-the-mill Chevy Volt or Nissan Leaf will be able to charge at this charging station.
Oh, they will. Good. Okay. Okay. And I'm happy to say that we're fulfilling one of sustainability committee's priorities. So thank you, Menjo, for that. And city.
Just because I teach a class on this for charging, Tesla is proprietary, so if you're something other than Tesla, you can't charge on them, but
Right.
they have the ability to charge on other chargers. But not every vehicle can do DC fast charging. So if you're looking at buying an electric vehicle, you have to verify that they have the ability to use a DC fast charger. Most
Right.
can use a level 2, but not all of them. If they don't have the right plug, they can't use a DC fast charger, but most do.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I don't know where you went, Councilman Berlant, but I think I saw your hand up.
It did. It moved me around when you put the hand up, so sorry. I just wanted to take a moment and thank the staff from the Placer County Air Pollution Control District as well for helping the city get through this process. And I know I appreciated hearing Menjel say that they'll be watching for that grant program to get more. A number of communities around us have gotten emergency vehicles, even chippers for fuel reduction. So there's just almost endless possibilities that grant program can provide us. So it takes time and energy. So appreciate Menjel and all the other staff for getting that money, because there is no such thing as free money. It takes a lot of money to get that. And I will note that even though we don't have the Magnolia Tennis Way parking lot on Google Maps as a public parking lot, ChargePoint symbol is there on Google. So we are one step ahead. We just need to get there. So the signage, as well as putting the parking on Google Maps, I think will be critical ways for people to even know that there's a parking lot back there. So good work, Menjel. This is nice to see this one finally be wrapped up and in use, and appreciate your effort. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Menjel, I do have a couple of quick questions. Thank you for the report. I'm really happy to see the project get completed here. Any chance we can get more charging stations to help draw folks, particularly ones like this that are so fast, to draw people off of Interstate 80 and get their quick charge and make it up to Tahoe, or vice versa to make it back down to the Bay Area, wherever they're heading, is great. This is a single point charger, meaning only one plug, I presume. I haven't been by to look at it, but I guess that's my question. Is this a one plug or a two plug?
So this is a one plug charger, but the beauty of the way we approach this infrastructure is that we laid enough conduit and enough, I guess, electrical power to add another charger, or actually up to 4 other chargers at this particular location without having to dig back up the ground and getting into the wire. So we're though this is a single charger right now, we're set to add to the infrastructure. And believe you me, we will be aggressive at going after the Placer County Air Pollution District grants to try to make just that thing happen.
That's good to hear that you've got the infrastructure in the ground. So I assume all of the electrical switchgear and transformer and the like is all sized to accommodate the additional chargers once we find funding to buy those?
That is correct.
Okay. And I guess kind of a basic question, but I feel the need to ask anyway. We paid a little bit of money and the grant took care of, a good chunk of the cost for this infrastructure installation. Is the ongoing cost covered by the rate being charged? It sounds like the city's managing this, or is ChargePoint handling it? Who's actually handling the day-to-day, paying the PG&E bill, all that stuff? And I guess the question I've got is, are what we're charging, it seems to be a fairly competitive rate based on my experience at other charging stations. What we're charging, is it covering the full cost of this facility, or are there other costs that the city will have to incur on an ongoing basis?
That's actually another great question. So being that I was so new to this, I talked to a lot of the neighboring agencies that are doing this kind of thing, and to make sure that the idea behind this program is for it to be self-sufficient, so that what we're charging should pay the bill and also put additional funds into our FEPs so that we can add new stations from just the revenue we generate from this. So we're going to monitor it closely and make sure that we're not charging the most, but we don't want to be cutting ourselves in the knees either. We want to ensure that the money we're charging not only covers the cost of the charge, but also adds a little bit of funds to make sure that we can continue this program.
Okay, is this related to this question, Alice?
No, it's something else I thought of, but
Yeah, I've got one more quick question. The existing station we have behind City Hall, we were out at our workshop on Saturday, and there was a car parked there when I got there in the morning. The same car was there in the afternoon. That's not the fast charger, but is there any limitations based on the funding sources for that particular station that would preclude us from putting signs up saying 4-hour maximum? I know we may not necessarily enforce that, but it is pretty frustrating, I know, for folks who do need a charge and know where the charging stations are, to have somebody just sit there or park there, you know, for extended periods of time. I love that this one has the idle charge, and people will learn very quickly that they want to get out of there as quick, you know, as soon as they're to a point where they have enough charge to move on. Is there anything at our existing one at City Hall that can be done, any limitations, I should say, to the funding source that was used to supply that? Because I know it's free. Is there anything that can be done there?
No, that's a great question, Mr. Mayor. And the reality is we can certainly do something there. There's nothing from the grant that we got when we installed that stating that as long as it remains public, but as we're keeping it equal to everyone. So if we say each individual can only park there for 2 hours at a time, then we can do that. And when that charger was put in, and another one was put in at the same time at the Nevada Street train station, and we have the same issue there. So maybe that's something we need to look into, getting some signage there, encouraging people to move on. And, you know, I guess it only takes the first time someone getting a parking ticket for being there too long or something that they will say, well, you know, this isn't something we want to do. But yes, we can certainly do that, to answer your question.
Well, I know Councilwoman Riddell Harris might appreciate to hear this, but the parking tickets for the charging stations in some of the garages in Roseville are quite expensive. So it does take just one of those to learn your lesson and set your timer to get your rear end out there and move your car once you're charged. I do think that's something important, Menchel, that we ought to look into. I know that it's convenience for our citizens, and I don't want to take that away. I certainly don't want to start charging for it, but we do pay that bill. And for folks that charge there for lengthy periods of time, it's not fair to other folks who maybe have a need to jump in and get a charge if they could. So I would appreciate if we could look into that and maybe bring something back in the future to talk about that a little further with council.
The other option is when we replace it, because they have a lifespan, that we do, because right now it's with a dumb charger, so it doesn't have all the capability of doing the charging the same way. We could put in a smart charger where maybe we charge a nominal fee until they get to that length of time, and then it kicks up pretty substantially. So there's ways of motivating the correct behavior that we can do, but normally you need the technology to be able to do it.
Got it. That's great information. Thank you. All right. Any other comments, questions on this item? Alice.
Mr. Mayor, I have to laugh because I was going to ask just about the same thing about the charger behind City Hall. You started talking about that because I notice that all the time too, that there are folks that kind of camp out there. And, you know, so I think that some signage would be great there. And I agree, you know, if we have an opportunity to do some upgrades there when it's time, I'd love to see, you know, something like Councilwoman Riddell Harris mentioned, if there's an opportunity to charge a little bit and then, you know, to kick up that charge. Because I think that is something that can help motivate the appropriate behavior and, you know, ward off all those power hogs, so to speak. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Menchel, thank you very much for that report. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I'll move by resolution that we authorize the recording of a notice of completion to Philhelp Electric for Placer County Air Pollution Control District Clean Air Grant for EV charging station.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And Amy, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this before, but I'm not sure that it's relevant or not, but the staff report talks about a different project under the issues section. Do we need to make any corrective action before we vote on this item? Or are we okay?
No, we
No
don't.
corrective action needed, Mayor.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Amy, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll.
Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris,
Aye.
and Mayor Spokley.
Yes, thank you very much. And now that I've got two strikes, we'll move on hopefully to public comment. This is a time provided for the public to speak on to the council on items not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. Council cannot act on items not included on the agenda. However, the items will automatically be referred to staff. Please speak your name, spell your name, and provide your address if desired. Council members shall have the opportunity to speak for 30 seconds on any items not on the agenda at this time. Do we have any council members that would like to speak? I saw Councilwoman Amara saying go first.
I just have a brief statement. The Auburn Journal this week, there was a guest editorial by our own Chief of Police regarding Senate Bill 82. I think it was an excellent article. I think it's something that we should all be aware of, and I am in full agreement with what he put. It changes the statutory definition of robbery, and I think that we should call attention to that and be aware of that coming down. So I want to thank our chief for being proactive in that regard.
Thank you for those comments. Anybody else on council have items they want to speak of? Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Of course, you and Councilman Daniel and I had the opportunity to be in person at the fire department's promotional award ceremony on Saturday evening, and very proud of all of our firefighters and all the work that they do to keep our community safe. And a shout out, of course, to Firefighter of the Year, Captain Shelby Davis, and also our Fire Corps Coordinator, Lynn Tinnell, who was awarded for Civilian Employee of the Year, in addition to all the other firefighters that were recognized for either promotional or work-related successes. So it was a very nice event, and was very proud to be there and to observe and to celebrate our firefighters for all the hard work that they do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the council? I don't have any comments, so we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Amy, do we have any members of the public who have submitted any public comment to us?
Yes, I received one public comment for tonight's meeting. I'll show it now. It's available in my office if anybody needs a copy, although it's pretty brief. And that's all for public comment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. John, I see you waving your hand.
One job.
I can answer that question. It's in recognition of violence against Asians and xenophobia. It was a national call by the president, so we lowered the flag.
Thank you, John. All right, we'll move on to council business. First up is our 2020 Police Department Annual Report presentation. Chief Canan, I see you're joining us.
I am. I'm working on it.
It's all right.
There's the video. All right. Well, good evening, Mayor Spokley, council members, Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police. And tonight we will be doing our presentation on the 2020 Annual Report for everyone. So I'll share my screen and I will bring that up. Everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Yes.
I got the presentation, hopefully. All right. Well, again, good evening again. Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police. And tonight we'll be able to highlight the work of the Auburn Police Department over the year of 2020. So again, I'd just like to kick it off. Super proud of the men and women of the Auburn Police Department and what they're able to accomplish throughout 2020. For our community and our nation and the world, 2020 was one of those years that we definitely want to get past and forget many of the things. But at the same time, a lot of great work happened as a result of it. And also, we were able to make some strides for the police department, in our successes. And a number of these things we've talked about over the year and also even earlier this year. But, we couldn't have done it without the folks. And, I want to note here that there's a lot of information in here. There's a lot of data, statistics. There's pictures throughout this presentation, but it's 35 slides and it's not going to capture all of the great work that was done throughout the year. And at the same time, I just want to make a note now. I mean, we're very fortunate to have such a supportive community for the police department and supportive city leadership. As we will see in this presentation, we had an outpouring of support throughout the year, even while we went through some turmoil for law enforcement and a lot of the calling to defund and everything else. And we were fortunate that we didn't experience that. And it's our job to continue to have that positive relationship with our community and continue to do what we do best, which is, keep our community safe. One of the things that we did this year as well, in 2019, we were able to actually have an in-person team building workshop with all staff. One of the things we talked about therein was our current mission statement and core values. What I found out then was a lot of the folks, part of the police department, really didn't have any buy-in and an opportunity to develop a new or that old mission statement. So in 2020, we set out to start developing a new mission statement, one that was brought together and pieced together by all the staff here, and same with our core values. And so here is our new mission statement that you've read: a team of dedicated professionals, relentlessly protecting the innocent, improving the quality of life for our community through compassion and partnerships in order to preserve justice and equality. So, a lot of mission statements really focus on chasing the bad guys and everything else. But in our discussion, really, it is about protecting the innocent and protecting those victims as best as we can. And yes, chasing the bad guys is inherently a part of that, but we want to focus on being positive. And then our core values: professionalism, respectful, ownership, integrity, and empathy. That last one, we can't always put ourselves, we can't always understand what folks are going through. When we contact them, we might not have had those same experiences. But the one thing is, we can do our best to put ourselves in their shoes as we help them through their situation. So that was one success that we had in 2020. We were able to do those, and soon we will have those up in our police department to model those. Again, 2020, we saw the retirement of two longtime Auburn PD folks, Lieutenant Victor Pecoraro and Sergeant Gary Hopping. I mean, you see there the combination of time that they served the city of Auburn in 46 years of law enforcement service. Both of them started in law enforcement with the city of Auburn and retired with the city of Auburn. So a lot of institutional knowledge that they were able to impart, certainly as we were making sure the transition was going to happen. So the best of both of them in their retirement. With retirements comes promotions. This is exciting stuff. We were able to promote Lieutenant Brian Morrison and also Sergeant Joe Almeida. So Brian comes to us from SAC PD, where collectively he has 22 years of law enforcement service, spent the last 4 years here in Auburn, and a ton of experience. For me as the chief, definitely someone I can lean on and take from his experience, and definitely a great addition to the command staff here. Sergeant Joe Almeida, 12 years with the city of Auburn. Again, he is an Auburnite through and through. Went to Placer High. So again, great addition to our management team overall. And awards and recognitions. So we had the life-saving award. You see there that Sergeant Almeida and Officer Joe Gray, they received their life-saving award for saving someone who was unfortunately overdosing on narcotics. So you've heard much in the news about fentanyl, the use of Narcan. So their quick action and their level-headedness, they were able to administer the Narcan and then do CPR until we can get EMS in there, and they ultimately save the person's life. So, and then we have Detective Adam Klein. So Adam is our Detective OIC. And you'll see there that he earned the Community Service Award for his work that he did with a Placer County chaplaincy, law enforcement chaplaincy specifically. And what they did was, with COVID, a lot of things couldn't happen. Our chaplaincy program relies heavily on donations, like many other nonprofits. So they worked together to do a drive-through pancake breakfast with our chaplaincy. So great work on on their part. And then Officer of the Year, we were able to highlight her in the Auburn Journal as well. Detective Angela McCullough. She did. We're a small police department, so if we have someone out for a long period of time, everybody's got to step up and take on additional roles. And Detective McCullough did just that. She actually, this is her second year in investigations, and because of someone was out for long term, she pretty much handled all of the investigations, oversaw our school resource officer at the time as well. Some of the big things she did was the end of 2019, we had a homicide investigation. So early in 2020, she was all doing the follow-up, working with the DA's office to make sure that all the information was being obtained, pulling evidence, doing follow-up interviews. And at the end of the day, the individual responsible for the homicide was found guilty of all charges. So that's good. It's good stuff. And we were able to do that. Again, being able to pull on the experiences, the training, and like I noted in there, her work ethic, she's definitely a tremendous asset to the police department. Her demeanor is great. As you can see there, one of kindness and compassion, which actually draws admiration to the victims as well as suspects. So it's not always what you hear about law enforcement professionals, but it's certainly what we have here in the city of Auburn. Here's our class of 2020. So these are the folks that we brought on in 2020. As you can see here, Sarah Roach is an officer. Aaron Berthelsen was a reserve officer for us, and in August, we actually made him full-time with some of the retirements and the vacancies. Ben Dorr is a reserve officer for us. Bryant Correa, another reserve officer. He's actually a level 2 for us, and he's going through a lengthy field training program to get him some experience and some exposure. Alan Perez, many might know that he was an officer here before, retired, moved out of the area. When he came back, he asked if we'd bring him on as a retired annuitant and working a reserve position, which we obviously did. And then Paul Kessler came on in December. He's one of our newest volunteers, but he's actually took on the role as our volunteer coordinator. So he's a volunteer coordinator. He's a great resource to have for us moving forward. And here's the stats. So we're still using and will continue to use the uniform crime reporting, part 1 statistics. In the future, we're going to move to what they call, it'll still be UCR reporting, but it'll be different statistics and different data. So here we are with our violent crime, or part 1 violent crime, which tracks homicide, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. And you can see there with the graphs, we had no homicides in 2020. Our rapes remain the same. And the thing about the rapes is that a few years ago, they changed the definition of what the rapes were, which then created an increase in the count. And robberies, we had 4, which is a reduction of 1 compared to last year. And then you'll notice there the aggravated assaults, we saw an increase of 5, 39 from 34. With small numbers being big percentage changes and what have you. But overall, in the part 1 crimes, we saw a 6% increase in the violent crime compared to 2019 data. Robbery and homicide were the most significant decreases, with 100% with homicides and 20% down in robbery. Aggravated assaults, unfortunately, those went up 15%. And we show that about 25 of those were domestic violence related. A little bit lower than what we had last year. But the interesting part is I think this is going to be one of those years that might be a little bit of an anomaly with reporting. One, for us, we're still splitting the difference between 2 systems. The first half of the year, we're using our older system, Leeds and Tiburon. And the second half of the year, we're using all RIMS data. But we're not quite sure if the reporting was consistent. I know there's a lot of speculation throughout 2020 that victims may have not been able to report because they were trapped in their home or wherever they lived with their abuser. So it's something that we're definitely have to kind of follow and look into as we get more data into it. But if you compare our violent crime from 2020 from this year to 2018, we're still down 28%. Here we have our property crimes. So this is part of the same UCR Part 1 statistics. It follows the burglary, larceny, vehicle theft, and then arson. You can see there that burglary was our most significant decrease, and larceny remained about the same, slightly lower, but vehicle theft came up about 8 vehicles being stolen. Again, burglaries, 57% decrease in reported burglaries. Overall, in property crime data, we showed a 14% decrease in comparison to last year. And that was a raw number from 236 in 2019 to 202. So overall, we saw an 11% decrease in the UCR Part 1 data. Comparison to 2019, it was a decrease of 31, like I have there, combined total of 254 UCRs, 52 violent crimes, 202 property crimes, and it's a decrease by a raw number of 31. And then note there that burglary was our largest decrease, where motor vehicle theft showed our largest percentage increase of 42%. It went from 19 in 2019 to 27. Here you have calls for service and incidents. So overall in 2019, we had 20,338 total calls and incidents that we were tracking, and compared to 2020, where we had 23,372. For us, that was an increase of 3,034, 15% increase in calls for service and incidents. Our COVID and extra patrols, you can see the chart there. The officers' extra patrols, almost doubled. Pretty significant increase there. Our foot patrols increased quite a bit, and as well as our airport checks. But you'll see later on this presentation, certainly with COVID, the goal was to be seen everywhere we could possibly go, making sure we were checking on, businesses and residents. The concern was people were going to use the 80 and 49 corridor to target some of our businesses in those different places. We saw that with a burglary and a robbery that took place. It was 2 juveniles, though, that were responsible for that right at the beginning of the COVID and a lot of the restrictions that were being put on. Traffic data. The police department doesn't have a dedicated traffic team. Our officers are responsible, our patrol officers are responsible for pretty much all traffic related issues. That's traffic citations, traffic stops, traffic collisions. A lot of those different things all fall to the patrol officers who are working the streets. We have about 67.5 miles of roadway here in the city of Auburn. And again, typically we have one supervisor, one officer, maybe a second officer working the streets. So, we do know, I understand that traffic is a pretty significant concern for a lot of people here in the city of Auburn. And we try to work those different spots as much as we can. That's why we talk about using our traffic data collector. We currently have one. We're actually going to go out and purchase a second one to help, kind of track more areas and get some more information going on out there. But you'll see here, we had an increase in our traffic citations and our stops, as well as a decrease in collisions and DUI arrests. So that could be because people just weren't out and about. Bars were closed, restaurants were closed for a long time. So could correlate with a decrease in DUI arrests. And then collisions, for a long time, people weren't out on the road. So we continue to be pretty proactive, 120% increase in traffic citations. Our investigations. So again, talking about our investigations team, we have a detective officer in charge and one detective. In addition to that, we have one school resource officer that kind of splits their time helping out with investigations as well as being at the school. 2020, a little bit unique where schools were closed pretty much 3/4 of the year. So they spent a lot of time helping out investigations with the various stuff coming in. We also have 2 other detectives, both assigned to 2 different regional teams in the county. Our Trident team, which focuses on narcotics and investigations, as well as our Special Investigations Unit, which is a county team that we have 2 officers, one on each team, sorry. Total cases in 2020, they handled 335 cases. Kicked off the year with a human trafficking operation. We already made numerous arrests for the prostitution, primarily the pimps and the johns. Our goal with human trafficking is not to target the victims themselves, which are the prostitutes. And the goal is there to give them the resources that they need, hopefully get out of the situation they're in. But really our focus is going after the ones that are taking advantage of the victims. Burglary series. In the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, we saw a number of burglaries, vehicle burglaries, and commercial burglaries being done right there in our old town. We had 20 there. Like I said, later on, we were actually able to get some DNA through some fingerprints, and we were able to identify the suspect for those 20 burglaries, and we made an arrest out of it down there in Old Town. 290 program, so that's our sex registering program. Again, earlier this year, they went out and conducted an internal audit of our system, making sure all of our information was up to date, that we had all the right tracking in place, and then we were also able to conduct a couple operations throughout the year. And then I mentioned our homicide from 2019, that's the 160 in Cleveland, and they continued their work. Ultimately, the suspect was held to answer on all his charges. Dispatch and records. So our dispatch team is actually also our records team. They're having to split the difference between the two. But unfortunately, so what happens is I have 5 full-time dispatchers and 1 full-time supervisor who oversees those folks. But due to retirements and resignations, we actually spent most of the time. We went through a hiring process, selected a new dispatcher. She had 6 months of training, but we spent most of 2020 dispatchers at 3 and 4 dispatchers. We were fortunate we brought on the one dispatcher retired and the one that resigned. Both came back as part-time, which is able to offset a lot of our costs, but also takes off a lot of the burden from those dispatchers, those folks that are continue to work and cover those hours. They work 12-hour shifts, so 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, and they kind of split the difference between the Wednesdays in the middle of the week. PRA, they handle the PRA requests, outside agency reports. They process all the paperwork that's coming through. They handle everything at the front counter, all the phone calls that come in. Like I note there, over 34,000 total calls, including 911s, non-emergency, outbound calls, throughout the entire year. 911 calls, we got 4,900 in 2020, which is an increase by 10% from 2019. Our calls are answered, all calls are answered within about just under 7 seconds. Text to 911 feature kicked off towards the end of the last year. A lot of the stuff behind the scenes is the paperwork that they're trying to process and try to put together. They're sending everything to the DA's office. They're packaging everything up. Like I noted, over 2,000 additional items on top of being dispatchers, on top of trying to do the work and listen to the radio. This group here, we will oftentimes are the unsung heroes of law enforcement and a lot of other public safety aspects of it, because the only thing, people call, they're telling them what's going on, they're reporting it, but their ability to get information from the callers and then be able to listen to the officers and report things and know where the officers are, truly the lifeline of any street cop that's out there. So if you see a dispatcher, thank them for all the hard work, because again, a lot of times they go unnoticed and they're not part of, not necessarily seen as the part of the culture, which I can tell you that they completely are part of our culture, part of our family here. They do a tremendous amount of work for us. Property and evidence. So we have one community service officer who runs our property and evidence, as well as a part-time person who helps out. And this is just part of their job at running a property and evidence and crime scene investigations. I can tell you that being the chief, there's things that will get a chief fired, which is the property and evidence room. There's guns, there's drugs, there's money, all involved in everything that goes into that property and evidence room. So to make sure that we're conducting regular audits, making sure we're tracking it, external audits coming in to make sure that everything is where it belongs and that the process is seamless. And that's currently what we have here. We have a great team back there that's doing a lot of good work. Again, they took in over 2,000 items in 2020, a number of guns, 21 handguns, as well as, we took on 96 cases where we submitted to DOJ for DNA, blood, fingerprints, as well as, I note there are SART kits, so the sexual assault kits. And so far in 2020, we had 1 come back. So we'll be able to make some arrests for some things. our code enforcement. So we have a 3/4 time code enforcement officer here in the city of Auburn. They're currently operate from the police department, but support all departments here. They support fire, our building official. So they really have their hand in a lot of different things that are going on. One of the highlights of this year really came down to partnering with Auburn Fire and working on the weed abatements. I know the fire chief mentioned in his presentation last meeting, talking about kind of some of that process that they have to go through on the fire side of it, but being able to use our code enforcement and municipal code, we're able to do things a little bit faster with that. So Jennifer Solomon is our code enforcement officer. As you can see, I mean, she works hard on that aspect of it. Most of our goals is to get compliance. We're not in, we much prefer not having to go through the citation process or write abatement warrants to go through those things. We'd much rather get the compliance from the community right out of the get-go. So we spend a lot of time educating, a lot of letters that go out, letting people know what's going on. But at some point, though, they do end up with a citation. They do end up with an abatement warrant. And at times they even end up conducting hearings in front of the city council, as well as updating processes, making sure we have a good process as much as we can to continue to improve on that, to make us a little bit more efficient in these different areas. Goal is to continue to build Jennifer up, giving her the experience so she can continue to improve and serve the community in her capacity. Animal control. So I talked about additional work. Our property and evidence CSO, she is also our animal control officer for the city. As you can see there, she is the primarily responsible for that, although our patrol officers will go out there and respond to animal calls, certainly after hours. And then you can see there, 231 animal control calls for service. 66 animals were taken to the Placer County Animal Shelter for services. They do everything: barking dog calls, licensing, animal bites, and those types of things. Our volunteers, COVID put a wrench in a little bit of stuff. We weren't able to see a lot of our volunteers for most of the year. Most of them were in the vulnerable age range. So many of them kind of stayed away a little while, but we couldn't keep them away for the entire year. We had a number of folks who continue to come in the police department, help us out. The work they do, like I said, there's not enough thank yous for the work that they put in for us and how much they help getting things done. They represent us at different events. They help us out with administrative functions here. Fred is one of our busiest volunteers here. He helps us out with our ID cards, a lot of our paperwork type stuff, documentation. It's awesome. They help out with our fingerprints once we got that kicked back off. But you can see there, Fred Canning, Eileen Cole, Art, and Sandy, and Famiko. And we have a great volunteer team. So if you know anybody who wants to be a volunteer for us, send them our way. Neighborhood policing model. So this was the idea of Sergeant Tucker Huey with our new CAD RMS system. And this way the city is broken up into 2 beats, but also 17 reporting districts. So there's smaller geographical areas within the city. And we took our 8 patrol officers and divided those reporting districts up amongst the 8 of them. So each one of the officers has 2 reporting districts. The good part about this is the way we designed the RDs was that they were going to overlap with our nextdoor.com model. And this was a lot of the neighborhoods have already been created amongst themselves. So we overlaid our reporting district model with the nextdoor.com overlay. And this is how we started to develop this communication between the two. We have about 24 neighborhoods in the city of Auburn, reaches about a little over 4,600 households, which is, I think we're a little over 50% in Nextdoor. But the goal here was to, when we start talking about community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing, the goal is to actually have the officers work those problems in their areas to the full extent that they're capable, and taking the lead on some of these things. Those issues could be traffic, like we talked about. It could be maybe a drug house or some type of other nuisance that goes on. And the goal is to have the officers be the point of contact for the community there, for the neighborhoods, and then work with them to solve some of those problems. This is not a way to contact us for emergencies. this is the kind of those long-term quality of life issues that an officer can work on when they're here. Our social media program, we continue to see an increase in our social media and our followers. You can see there, Facebook was our biggest increase with our number wise. We increased about 2,757 followers, which is a 27% increase for us from last year. Instagram, that happens to be a 218%. Small numbers, big changes. So we have 1,000 followers on our Instagram page. Next door, we talk about, we're at 792 new households to interact with. We're up over 4,600 now, and Twitter, we're about almost 3,400 followers on our Twitter feed. So we do our best to try to push out information out there and make sure people are in the know of what's going on. We've talked about this throughout the earlier this year as well as last year. Our new CAD RMS project that we took on fully implemented in July of last year. We're not writing paper anymore. This is actually, everything is electronic. It's completely integrated between the two. It's saving our dispatchers time from having to do dual entries. It's saving our officers time from having to do dual entries. The property and evidence side of it, it's saving our property and evidence CSO time with the data entry and the information. We're able to pull it out pretty quickly, and it's actually usable information, usable data for us. So definitely heading in the right direction with that project. And we continue to learn new ways of how to search and find data, continue to audit it, make sure the information that's going in is good data that we can pull out. Okay. Our homeless transient strategic plan presented on this earlier this year, and we saw a decrease of chronic homeless by 22%, as well as a decrease in those nuisance type calls by 16%. Mutual aid response last year, the officers went to the Bear Fire in Butte County as well as the Jones Fire in Nevada County. Our job at these functions really is to conduct patrols, evacuations, do our best to prevent any looting and folks coming from outside the area to take advantage of these victims. Back to Zero campaign, our tobacco efforts. So last year we created the new tobacco ordinance, and that was in conjunction with, ultimately it was create a municipal code that we would cite juveniles found with tobacco products, and then send them to, get them to go to a diversion program that was headed by our partners at the Health and Human Services. This year, or 2020 rather, we had 14 juveniles that we cited earlier in the year, and COVID kind of threw a wrench in it because we weren't able to have all of our classes, but we got 5 of the youth to complete the program. Found that one actually just paid the $100 fine that's associated with that. And one of the things that my school resource officer said, that as soon as this went into effect, what the school, specifically EB Kane, experienced was a lot of kids just turned in all of their tobacco devices and everything else. Said, hey, I just don't want to get caught with it. I don't want to get in trouble. So that was a very, very nice unintended consequence as a result of this. And kids just gave it up without not wanting to get in trouble. We have seen a decrease in some of the other places too. We know that a lot of the kids would leave campus, go to our parks. They knew that they couldn't get in trouble at the time, but we've seen a decrease in the kids smoking. So we're having a good win with this. Just kind of told the other day that we did have one repeat offender, juvenile who actually went through the class, one of those 5, went through the class, learned a lot, but due to peer pressure and everything going on, and all his friends doing it, he started up again. So he actually got another ticket. So we'll take the next step with him. So many of you have seen our different special awareness patches that we do. I'll be honest, they're not gimmicky. These things are, we start talking about tying back to our community and how these patches, what they represent, not only for our community, but for us too. Obviously, a lot of places kicked it off with the pink patch that you see there in kind of the bottom center. And that really kicked it off. And then you've noticed, we've done a couple salute to service patches. Many of the folks here in the police department are veterans, but many folks in our community are veterans as well. And this is just one way of honoring that. The large patch there was actually our 2020 cancer patch that we did. As you can see there, the different ribbons for the different cancers are along the side. They actually took the place of the olive branches that were there. And what you'll see in the highlight there is this patch was actually highlighted as one of the company's favorite patches for 2020. It was on their Facebook page and everything else. So look for more patches in the future as we do this, again, that are representative of the police department and representative of our community as well. This is where I get to talk about a lot of the community stuff that we did throughout the year. I mean, things that go unnoticed, things that aren't seen or aren't captured or quickly forgot about as we move through the year. But top center, I mean, the officers changed tires. And they're not looking for any credit. They're not looking for anything, but their goal is to, help somebody, help those who couldn't help themselves, get them back on the road, get them somewhere safe. We did our second annual inspection as well as our first awards and recognition that we did last year. I know a couple council members were there along with our city manager. No Shave November. You see the picture on the right, that's Lieutenant Garlock, who represented us at the Wreaths Across America. I talked about the Placer County chaplaincy, but all the different campaigns we do, all the different awareness activities we do Read Across America. You see there, our school resource officer Sandrigan's there. One of our newest officers in the top is Officer Berthelsen was there, getting into our classrooms, developing those relationships with our youth. COVID unique. We had to find different ways to connect with the community. We were using social media a lot, and about the only way we could really connect with them. So we created a coloring campaign for coloring our patch, and as you can see there, we were hanging them up in the lobby. And then we also kicked off a scavenger hunt that they did over Facebook. So, again, finding unique ways to connect with the community, even though we couldn't see everybody face to face, the officers were still doing it. We saw the civil unrest. We saw the protests here in Auburn. We were out there making sure that, we were connecting with the community, making sure that they were safe doing what they were doing. But we had a chance to talk to a lot of people while we were out there and kind of connect where we probably wouldn't have been able to before. You can see the APD gift card donations. Staff here took it upon themselves during the holiday to start a holiday donation program. They raised over $2,000 and were able to help 15 different families. I had the new owner at the Crevice Creek and Company in Old Town reach out and say she wants to participate in a clothing drive and a toy drive. We reached out to the Hip Hop Congress to find out, hey, who could we do this? Who could we benefit? We reached out to our Latino Leadership Council, and we helped out a number of families with that partnership right there. You can see the top picture. Many people are familiar with the Shop with a Cop program. This year, 2020, a little bit different. Every agency was able to have 5 juveniles that they would sponsor and go shopping with. We participate in that, but this young man here was sick when they did that. So Officer Sandrigan actually took him out a few weeks later on his own and went shopping. So we followed through with that. These are a lot of things that people don't see, and we see it, we experience it, but until we're able to kind of talk about it and try to use social media as much as we can. Community support. It was almost every day people were coming into the station, dropping off donuts, coffee, food. The cards were coming in, the thank you notes were being dropped off. We had our police department, heart bombed a couple of different times. So we're so very fortunate to have a community that is as supportive as they are. I talked about COVID, when businesses were closed, people were home. You can see there in those pictures, there's a lot of empty streets, and that's not normal for us. We set out, we want to make sure the community felt safe and knew that we were still out there providing services. The officers were taking pictures throughout the day, throughout their shifts, different neighborhoods. They were actually reaching out and saying, hey, I'm in your neighborhood, come out if you want to chat and check in and everything else. So these are just some of those pictures that were being taken. We talked about this before, report of concern. We want to make sure that We use technology for our community to connect with us. And here's some of our 2021 goals we want to get done. We talk about the new CAD RMS project being completed, developing a crime reduction model that fits our needs here in the city of Auburn. Finish the 3rd year of the strategic homeless plan. Increase our neighborhood watch and outreach program. So with the new volunteer coordinator I mentioned earlier, we're looking at new ways to revitalize our neighborhood watch programs, in conjunction with our neighborhood policing officer, our nextdoor.com program, and doing some more outreach that way. And then technology. I mean, one of the things we saw with COVID was, we have to change the model a little bit. We are taking a lot of reports over the phone. So looking at a web-based program to connect with the community, but also the ability for our community to do online reporting. So that's a couple of things that we're looking towards in 2021. And that is the end of my report.
Wow, Chief, thank you very much. Incredible report. I think I mentioned this a couple of times before, but the presentations that both you and the fire chief are providing to this council and our community have really stepped up a notch. So thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open this up to my fellow council members. Who wants to start with questions or comments? We'll do them both together. I see Councilwoman Amara's hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Spokley. Thank you, Chief Canan. That was very, very well done presentation. And I appreciate all the work you do. I appreciate you introducing the officers and the volunteers. And what's impressive is how well you use volunteers. That's very impressive. And how you show such appreciation for them. I know they're a vital part of the program and they can be of great assistance. So thank you for that. I just have a couple of questions. So first of all, I know, Chief Canan, that you're a strong advocate of community policing. And so in that regard, what efforts, I know there's been a lot of community interaction, but even more so, do you have even more emphasis on this for the future? And can you tell me a little bit, how you've made some changes with regard to community policing, and especially when it comes to especially interacting with I'd like to hear, maybe has there been some interaction with like Confluence High School and many of the students there? I'm interested in that, if you can expand just a little bit.
Sure, and thank you for that. I think a big part of it, yes, I'm a big proponent of community policing and problem-oriented policing. There are two tried and true strategies and philosophies that if they're done right, you'll see a tremendous amount of success. And we've seen that, just interacting with our downtown business association or Old Town Business Association. But the schools, our SRO plays a huge role in that, certainly at the schools that you mentioned. But, moving forward, this year we kicked off our Chiefs Community Advisory Council. A lot of it is trying to get into these different areas that maybe we wouldn't normally be at. We look at some of our underserved parts of our community. There's an apartment complex off Red Hawk Lane, Palm Terrace, that the officers actually spend time there. And, we talked about one of those pictures you saw. We were actually, unfortunately, there was a young man who accidentally shot himself. And we spent a lot of time at that complex, getting to know the kids, bringing ice cream, and it takes that time. It takes building that trust. Today, there's a homeschool that some folks do here in the city of Auburn. It's out of the Hip Hop Congress, the Gomez Center, that they do. One of the officers was interviewed today on a mental health project that they're working on. So, with our neighborhood policing model that we talked about, getting those officers in their reporting districts and in the neighborhoods, the goal is to be more interactive there. And so that should go right in line with that increase in the community policing side of it.
And just to follow up, you do have an SRO for, did you say part-time? So is that officer able to go to even the junior high school and connect with those children there?
Unfortunately, not as much as we would like. This is where kind of the staffing component comes into play. We try to focus a lot of the efforts from our investigations, our 2 detectives that we have in-house. But sometimes there's times that they get overwhelmed with the amount of calls that come in. So we try to offset some of that with our current SRO. Again, 2020 was a little unique given the fact that schools are closed as much as they were. But the goal is certainly to keep that SRO there at Placer High as much as possible and work with Placer High as much as possible. I'd love to be able to get a second school resource officer who can focus on the lower level schools like the middle school. I mean, we just had a meeting talking about the fentanyl issues and what's going on. Even the drug use amongst kids and the struggle that they have with their mental health. It would be great if we had someone that could connect with the middle school and EB Kane. That's where, kids are struggling, let alone, but when you're a junior high kid, you struggle even more. And if we could start developing that relationship at an earlier age and develop, continue that close-knit, small community feel, it would be, I think the benefits would certainly outweigh that cost that's related to that. Certainly one of our goals, and we're trying to see how we can do that, but the relationship is there, yes.
So yes, I would be really interested in having you report or at least bring forward a proposal to possibly fund an SRO at the middle school. Because I like you said, that's community policing. That's an opportunity to make a difference before it gets out of control. We can be proactive. These kids can benefit tremendously, and it'll help us all in the long run. But anyway, I should be asking you questions. The next question I had was, you talked about property crimes, and do you have a closure rate? Do you have any data with regard to property crimes? And I mean, even vehicle crimes, in terms of how many of those cases have been closed? I know you made some great progress in Old Town with the arrest of the individual who was responsible for 20 thefts. So I don't know, do you keep that sort of data? And
so I can look it up. I don't have that data with me right now, but it's certainly something that we can circle back with the council on and get you that information.
Okay, I'd be interested in that. And then there's a lot of areas, just looking here and looking at the some of the other graphs, that there is a decrease in crime. And so I guess my question is, what do you attribute that to? Is it something that you're doing? Is it something that, can you attribute that to maybe not one thing, but in general, something?
I guess I would love to just be able to say absolutely everything we're doing is reducing our crime. But unfortunately, that's the hard part about what we do. Not everything is within our control. Whether or not people are not staying in jail long enough. We saw that with Prop 47 and AB 109. This was, again, COVID. It was interesting because a lot of people were just getting tickets that would normally go to jail anyways, but they weren't. The jail wasn't taking them. So could be because we weren't getting a lot of calls. Potentially, we didn't see the same amount of crime, but we saw vehicle theft go up. So it's hard to say. I mean, like I said, I wish I could just say absolutely everything we were doing and is what's bringing the success. But I would submit that the officers and the work that they were doing out there, the proactive work, some of the measures that we have, the community interaction, we get a number of, not that we want it this way, but, we get things through our Facebook Messenger telling us, hey, there's something going on. We get things on Nextdoor that's going on. We get people calling. So I think, a lot of that could be tied into those things. Just the way we're communicating with the community. And I think the way the community can communicate back to us, I certainly hope that's how they feel, that because of that, that we're seeing these decreases in the crimes. Our SEPTED and making sure that, folks are reporting those things that are, one, they're taking care of, they're hardening their targets in their homes, is reducing that. At the same time that, with neighborhood watch programs or, reporting things that hopefully we're not underreporting either as a result of that stuff.
Right.
So.
Okay. And now going over to the homeless, I know you gave us an extensive presentation and report. I just wanted to circle back a little bit. There is a 22% decrease, and I believe you might have said it at the last meeting. You were able to place several, I believe. Can you give us, or do you recall which, how many were actually placed, or how many were brought over to the homeless shelter?
So I know we called the 3 stories we gave you. The one was the veteran who was able to actually get to the VA services in Reno. There was the gentleman who had lost his job, was homeless for about a year, and we're actually able to get him into the housing with Health and Human Services. We actually we're able to post that on our social media site where they took a picture of the gentleman. And then there was the woman who was in and out of jail with drug and alcohol issues, couldn't get into any type of housing because she had to stay sober, which at one point they were actually able to, she made the decision on her own to be able to do that and stay clean, and she was able to get placed into housing as well. So there's a couple of those successes as a result. I know with the number, we dropped 16%, which in our nuisance type calls, but also we saw the 16 of the chronic homeless there that we were able to get some help too. We're not sure where everybody went. Some of that is us not being able to track them anymore, but they fell off the way we're tracking, one of the ways we're tracking internally, which is the 4 months of contacts over a rolling 12-month period. So if they didn't meet that criteria anymore, then we consider them not to be a chronic on our list.
And I'm sure it takes a lot of time for you to, make contact, and you have to go back, and they have to go back and call into these people and establish a rapport with them. And I'm sure that takes a lot of time. But if it solves it for the long term, that's good for everyone. And then just skipping to my last question, it has to do with the tobacco program. That I would imagine is including vaping. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's all part of it. They have those tobacco type products. But part of the program too was the businesses. So the city council at the time voted to ban all flavors, flavored tobacco and the vaping and everything else. And then at the same time, the businesses are paying an $850 annual tobacco licensing fee. And that fee pays for the inspections by staff, operations conducted by staff. But then the goal again, it was to get the kids that were smoking and vaping, and as long as they weren't selling it or being able to buy it here in the city of Auburn, we all felt that was a win. I know I've heard from other community members that they would like to see it have been extended, beyond Auburn, but I think anything else, I think we talk about early adopters to things.
Thank you again for all the work that you and your staff do. And that's all of the questions I have. Thank you, Mayor Spokler.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go in the order that I saw the hands pop up. So if I missed it, I apologize, but this is the order I saw. I'm going to go next to Councilmember Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Chief. I as well appreciate your thoroughness. There is a lot to go through. Even having read this over the weekend, there's a lot to still try to process with the numbers. But I too, like the mayor said, appreciate the style of the presentation. A couple questions for you. You had kind of mentioned, especially at the beginning, some of the police reform discussions that occurred in 2020. Just curious, what do you think, are changes that you'll be bringing here to Auburn, or even lessons learned out of some of those, nationwide discussions?
Well, thank you for that question. It comes down to one, the trust that you have within the community. I think that ties in with Councilwoman Amara's question of what are we doing about community policing? What are we doing to build the trust? And a lot of that comes down to education as well. What is it that we do? What is it we can do as the police department? And we're having those, the 8 Can't Wait campaign came out, chiefs across the country, the state of California. We wrote up, how those different 8 uses of force issues and policies were driving this, some of the discussion. And, as long as I think the more translucent we can be, the better our community trust is, the better understanding that they have of us. And, in a lot of different ways we've created, like I said, one of those ways of transparency was creating the Police Chiefs Community Advisory Council. And, have, 12 to 15 individuals that are tied into the community, learning kind of the inside information about what's happening with the police department. Things that we don't necessarily have an opportunity to tell everybody. Using social media and talking about things like Senate Bill 82 and why we're pushing this information out. The more we can educate the community, the more trust we have, but at the same time, it actually makes our job easier. Because if people understand how the law is working and why it is sometimes we do something in one case and don't do it in another, is understanding the variances of that. Getting our officers, getting our community to know our officers. Like I mentioned, one of the officers today was doing an interview, and in some of that discussion came out of, now that you know who this officer is, and how warming they are and how inviting and how calm they are, when you see that something happen, you're more likely to trust that they're doing the right thing. And giving that officer the benefit of the doubt in some type of calls. And so I think a lot of that is just having understanding. We've seen a lot of these places where, it comes down to that relationship aspect. Let's be honest. We all read the article that came out and said California Police Department is texting these different things of violence and everything else against and sexual natures. That hurts us all. I mean, that doesn't just hurt Eureka PD. The title of that article said California PD, California Police. Well, we are one of those. So our community questions that. It kind of points back and says one more thing that the police department's doing. Look what this one's doing. The subculture within law enforcement. That hurts us all. And this profession, we're not a big profession, but anything done here locally, anything done across the country impacts how we are able to do our job. So we have to, educate our community. We have to build that trust. And, it's hard to earn and easy to lose.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that, and appreciate you taking the word transparency, that's kind of a government buzzword, and actually providing some examples of things that you're doing beyond, these presentations and the data to the public and the community engagement, hard examples of ways to build that trust and to be transparent. So thank you for that question, for that response.
Thank you.
The stats, the stats are interesting. Councilwoman Amara, kind of, pick your brain a little bit about, why are they the way they are? And, understand there's a lot of variables that maybe we don't today have an answer for. Just curious if you have any idea how these statistics line up both regionally or even across the state. Is this decrease in specific categories a trend that we're seeing, and have any others analyzed to determine, is it truly a decrease, meaning there are less rapes? Is it meaning that there are less robberies? Is it because of definition, or is it because of the pandemic?
Yeah, those are great questions. I haven't compared necessarily our data to the region in particular. I do know other cities have seen an overall decrease in crime as well. But we are seeing some of the increase in the same crimes, certainly in this region. That's the property crimes. When you look at the kind of the larceny and the vehicle theft, a lot of cities, not gonna say every city, but a lot of cities are in this region. You've heard about the catalytic converter thefts. Those are, we had 20 of those just since, from July of last year to December of last year, we had 20 catalytic converter thefts. So it's, yes, these are the basic numbers, but when we start breaking it down, you start seeing more specifics that we have here, and catalytic converter thefts are astronomical in the region. So that's one example. Burglaries, I would potentially say that, well, most people were home. And as a result of most people being home, we saw less residential burglaries. We were out and about a lot. So with the commercial burglaries, potentially being able to be part of that is being seen in a lot of these different areas. We did know, like I said, right when COVID hit, we were pretty proactive on being in these different areas, being along the corridor and everything else. I mean, we did have 2 juveniles rob a 7-Eleven and then burglarized one of our closed restaurants and stole the alcohol from there. We caught those 2 kids both times. But we did, we saw some of that stuff. So I couldn't tell you exactly what necessarily the region saw as a whole. And I'd love to be able to, like I said, point back and say, we saw these decreases because, we were out in these neighborhoods, we were being seen. But I can't honestly tell you that's the case.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Again, just looking to see what trends are, especially as we get into, budget planning for next year. I've long felt that having 2 officers on the street with a supervisor in a city our size is woefully understaffed. And so, with the data showing that your overall calls are up, but these crimes are down, I think it warrants a little bit more work to figure out, well, what are those calls? What type of calls are on the rise, and what's the right position to handle those calls. I think you already do a very good job as the nation questions back to some of the police reform. Police departments having to do or being forced to do mental health types of issues, and you guys have partnered with HHS. We have a CSO. We've got the right classification for the right issue. But again, just kind of thinking about where you think Auburn is going over the next several years to making sure that we're staffed appropriately, and again, following to see, is this a trend or just a changeover? And is it just, I think you mentioned this, but is it just, since we're changing over our data collection systems and our CADs, is it just a data collection, question? So appreciate that for sure. You briefly touched on this, but the regional teams, what do you think that we here in Auburn get out of participating in those regional teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes down to the education of why we're part of these teams. One is a Trident narcotics team, and then the other one is our special investigations unit team. Being a small agency, for the 2 detectives that we have in those teams, we increase the size of our department and our reach by tenfold. Each one of those units, I think, have 10 detectives, each one of them plus. So if we have a major incident that happens, we can immediately pull in those resources and the technology. And when I say resources, I mean detectives with a lot of experience in undercover operations, experience in search warrant writing, experience in warrant services, experience in tactical operations. All those things that those 2 teams bring to us can significantly impacts and makes us better when we're solving some pretty significant crimes. I mean, we talk about the 160 Cleveland Street homicide. By being able to pull in those resources, it happened late at night, and it was one of those whodunit type cases for us. We're able to pull a little bit of information off from our LPRs. As we started breaking down that information, we then were able to call in those teams that would already started helping us write phone warrants, the different types of warrants that go along with those things, operations, undercover operations, so they would get eyes on some of these locations and do surveillance for us. They're almost double the size of our organization within one phone call. So that is a significant aspect of it too. Our special investigations unit, so AB 109 came with money from the state that went to the counties. At one point, there was money that was going to individual police departments, but that has since gone away. But the county continues to get the AB 109 funding, and that goes through our probation department. And here in Placer County, what they've done is by creating the special investigations unit, and those agencies that participate in that, we get a portion of that funding as a result of participating on the team. So if we weren't to be on that team, we would not be getting the funding for that position, or the amount of funding that we get out of that. The other one is the Trident team. The Trident team, again, is a regional major narcotics investigations team between Placer County, Sacramento County, and El Dorado County. The work that they're doing on keeping drugs, out of this area, pretty significant, with methamphetamine arrests, seizures, fentanyl arrests and seizures. And so they're doing a lot of good work. And one of the benefits of that team is the asset forfeiture. That asset forfeiture, when these cases are tried and they're all completed, then there's a portion of that funding as a result of that case and those seizures that come our way. Now, I want to talk about asset forfeiture, where we are not getting vehicles, we're not seizing vehicles, and you will not see the Auburn Police Department or anybody else drive around in Corvettes and Ferraris and Lamborghinis. That stuff has all gone away when they reformed asset forfeiture. But this is funding that is coming our way from illegal operations, illegal drug operations that happens.
You missed the Auburn Police Ford Mustang that was from that program on the streets before your days. Moving along, and maybe this segues from Trident, but page 16 of your presentation, you have a category there that shows Trident. What does that mean in these statistics?
So prior to my arrival here as the chief, so there was an agreement with the Trident team that just items were booked here. So this could be drugs, any item that would be tied into the Trident case. So we were the place that was holding on to the items.
Gotcha. So the 132 are items seized, part of the Trident team, and we are the central keeper of that for the entire team.
Yes.
Okay.
For now.
Okay. Code enforcement, briefly, you mentioned some stats on Jennifer and her work. Just curious, with the move from Public Works to the PD, how's that working out from your perspective?
Well, for me, I'm a fan of code enforcement being housed at the police department. They go hand in hand with what we are doing. This also goes hand in hand with the problem-oriented policing type philosophy, because the code enforcement does handle, their expertise is in a lot of those things that are tied to quality of life. Businesses, the vandalism, the graffiti, the weed abatement, the yard cars that are out there. A lot of stuff that they are work on are quality of life type issues, and which are the most prolific and the most, they're the ones that are called on by the community. Those are the problems that the community wants to be addressed, because they're the eyesores, right? A lot of the crime, it happens, could be isolated to a place, but when someone's driving through their neighborhood and they see the weeds, the yard cars, the graffiti, all those things, that impacts how people feel about their neighborhood when someone sees all that stuff and it's not being addressed. So the role here, a 3/4 time code enforcement officer to dealing with a lot of the older type stuff that is here in this community, and certainly trying to stay ahead of working with that on those issues. But yeah, I mean, that's, for me, it's the right place here.
Great, thank you. My last question, page 21, and this is just more on a lighter note. The fire chief may not appreciate this, but I really appreciate the picture of the officer in the helmet being a CAL FIRE helmet and not an Auburn Fire Department helmet. So with that, very nice presentation. Appreciate your thoughtfulness. And there is so much here that I think our community really needs to take some time, more than just this presentation tonight, to really read through this, because a lot of good stats, a lot of good numbers. So Chief, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my questions and comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Lant. Wow, Chief, he caught you. He caught you on an image there.
Well, that's why we went CAL FIRE, because our Auburn Fire guys, no way, they do a great job.
We can only say this while the chief is muted and not part of the meeting right now. So thank you.
So again, in the order I saw the hands go up, I'm going to go to Councilman Dowden Calvillo, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chief. It was a very informative report. I echo those sentiments that had been previously voiced by my colleagues with regards to the professionalism and the amount of data that you've made available to us, in addition to the transparency. Transparency has always been a very key platform for me, and I truly appreciate that you continue in that particular regard as well. I also wanted to thank you for your leadership in the State Chiefs Association, Police Chiefs Association. I know that's a very important group, and they do some great things. And so thank you very much for not only being active, but being in a leadership role as you are doing legislation or on that committee. And to that end, again, thank you for your editorial that was in the Journal. But I wanted to encourage you that if there is legislation like the bill that you outlined in the Journal that you feel the council should take a support or an opposition position on, I would highly encourage you to bring that legislation to us so that we can then advocate as well, because that certainly is within our realm. And we have done that in the past. I know that when I was on the council in the past, we took active role in legislation, both at the state and federal level, but mainly at the state. So whatever we can do to help in that particular endeavor, please do not hesitate to coordinate with our city manager and get those items on the agenda so we can take an avid role. I also wanted to congratulate our detective, Angela McCullough. I love seeing her as the 2020 Employee of the Year for the police department. That's phenomenal. Very, very glad to see that. So congratulations to our detective for all of her good work. And we do appreciate that very much, as we do appreciate the work of all of our officers. I wanted to point out just in the presentation, I had a question on, it was, let's see if I can find the page number. Of course, I can't find it's slide number, must be 10. I think it is here. It says item 9, but it's the UCR Part 1 statistics on property crime. And it was specifically with regards to vehicle theft. And I just kind of wondered if you were noticing that vehicles were being stolen from residents, or were there more vehicles being stolen that were parked in public areas? And I ask that because I know that we had such a rush of vehicles parked in various locations, accessing the trails in the canyon and so forth. And I just wondered if you had any data on that.
That's a good question, and I don't have that data to let you know whether it was residential or commercial or some of these other areas.
Just kind of curious on that. So
circle back with that. And
then, with regards to the violent crimes, specifically aggravated assault, you had mentioned that about 25% of that was attributed to domestic violence, and I'm very sorry to hear that. I know that COVID, as you mentioned in your report, has been difficult in those circumstances, and that in many cases, victims aren't even able to report. So I'm unfortunately thinking that number is higher than what's reflected in your statistics, and I'm very sorry about that for sure. Looking at page 12, I wanted to thank you and your officers for your extra patrols. You had indicated that you were up 76% in your extra patrols, and especially with regards to the airport. And I think that's really key during COVID, when business owners were not able to be around their businesses as much. And so thank you very much for stepping up those patrols. I'm confident that you helped to deflect some criminal activities because of your extra patrols. So thank you very much on that. On page 13 on traffic data, just kind of curious, I saw that there was an increase in the traffic citations, and I just wondered what types of citations were being issued with COVID and so many people being home. I just was kind of curious on exactly what folks were doing to get citations.
Well, I could give you all the specifics, but I can tell you that speeding was actually one of our probably our largest citation, the violation, because less people were on the road. We actually saw a lot of people going a little bit faster than they normally would with regular traffic. So we saw a number of that happening as well.
That makes sense. I can understand that. I know that my colleagues asked some questions that I had already, that I had also wanted to ask, so I don't need to go over those again, just trying to go through the ones that haven't been asked. I did note, I had a note here about the code enforcement. I also wanted to know, this is on, let's see here, on slide 21, social media program. And I just wondered, who is managing the social media program for the police department? Is it? any
Well, we're doing a
particular-
good job.
I think I talked over you. I didn't hear your answer.
I said, do you think we're doing a good job?
I think you're doing a good job. Yes.
Okay, so we actually have all of our managers, so our sergeants, lieutenants, myself, and a couple other folks have access to our social media sites. The reason for that is, we couldn't just do it with one person. We don't have someone who is solely the voice for the Auburn Police Department. So we, as a collective group, agreed that, hey, our goal was to do so many posts each per week. We still continue to strive for that. But with everybody kind of hands-on, our sergeants, when they're working the field and they see something happening, they take advantage of the opportunity to post a picture of the good work the officers are doing or the traffic updates that need to go out. So we took an approach where kind of an all hands on deck and everybody plays a role in our social media. Next door is actually, is driven by the officers, especially since we rolled out this new neighborhood policing model. And so the officers are the ones driving the messaging in our next door. But no, the goal is really to play everybody to be a part of it and try to come up with that singular voice, and find a balance between, it's information only and, some of the fun stuff. We have a number of the officers that, have done the memes and everything else that's going on out there. And again, I think it makes it more approachable in that sense, kind of humanizing the men and women behind the badge. But that's where the success we're seeing out of that is just everybody playing a role.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. And along those lines, I'm glad that you mentioned the Chiefs Advisory Committee, and it's good to see that that's up and running. I look forward to some great things coming from that particular body. So thank you for doing that. Let's see here. Again, we talked about the homeless. There were questions on that, but we're covered already. With regards to the school resources officer, I know that Council Member Amara had indicated an interest in seeing some additional exposure at the middle school. I know that there are monies that are being allocated for those kinds of things at the state level, and that there might be monies that are coming through school districts too. So, I would encourage you to contact our school districts and see what funds might be available, especially in light of, with school opening and I know that they're opening with regards to COVID, but there's all kinds of monies that are available. So it would be worth taking a look and see if there's anything that we can latch onto to help us to supplement our funding in those efforts as well. So you never know. Sometimes there's funding in places you never think. And I will, if I see something that comes up just on my school board work, I'll let you know as well.
Thank you.
Other than that, I didn't really have any other questions that haven't already been covered, but I did want to thank you very much and for your presentation and all the great work. And also, Chief, you're wearing several hats here. You're not just running our stellar police department. You're working on, public works too. So really appreciate your stepping up and wearing all those hats on behalf of our citizens. Looking to get you some relief soon. I know how hard it is to wear the two hats. I've done that many times in my own career. So do appreciate that. And again, any legislation you think we need to be taking an active role, please do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And then that's nice. We have a stellar crew here in the police department, but also in public works. So
yes, public works as well. Absolutely. You've got great men and women there too. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my my questions and comments at this point.
Thank you very much. And Councilwoman Riddell Harris, if you have any questions that haven't already been asked, please have at it.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep this brief. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. I appreciate the amount of work that goes into this presentation, and also just seeing it all in one place and seeing the amount of work that you're able to accomplish with the number of people you have is just really great. So, kudos to you for all the great work you guys are doing. I also really love the focus on communication. I think that's really helped. I've heard a lot of positive things back from the community about the level of communication recently. So I think that's great as well. And on the picture that you had of Reading Across America, my daughter was actually in the class picture. So thanks for working with the younger kids too. I think that with today's environment, it's really important that kids have that positive interaction with the police department early. So that way when things were coming up during Black Lives Matter and other things, they were like, but I met this person and he's great. So it's nice to have that positive one-on-one interaction that they get at an early age.
Yes.
So a couple quick questions. This one's kind of a different one. I got a comment once about people doing donuts in a Placer High School parking lot. Did you notice a lot of issues with kids being bored while school sports and other things weren't happening? I know that they probably wouldn't raise to a citation level, but was that keeping you extra busy during COVID?
Actually, yeah. I mean, the fact you mentioned that, yes, we did see some boredom on the side of the youth and in and around the area, and we did see the donuts at the Placer High, and that's actually one of those the issues that I can tell you, the neighborhood policing model. So the two officers that are responsible for that have been working with the school. They've been working with Public Works to find a way to maybe limit how open that parking lot is, right? And using the different crime prevention through environmental design components, maybe some rocks to keep the kids from doing the donuts. The part about this is it was a community calling back, right? A lot of times I'm appreciative of the council letting me know what's going on and just letting your constituents call the police department too and reporting it that way. So we get kind of that real-time information going on as well. And if we have the officers available, at the time, if they're not on call, being able to get over there and to deal with that stuff. But that's one of those calls right there that, Officer Anthony Davis and Officer Sarah Roach were both working on with our Public Works crew and our SRO and the school district to try to solve that. I also know there's another parking lot not too far away from this one in particular. So, we're looking at how do we solve that stuff. So it's great when we have the good communication going on and the good feedback. So I appreciate that.
No problem. As far as outreach to the community, have you been focusing on any parts of the community that may have less trust in the police department in general, like those people of different equity levels or race, or just that traditionally have less trust in the police department, and focusing on building that trust with them?
We have, I mentioned earlier, the apartment complex that we have here off Red Hawk Lane. That's one of those locations that, based on demographics and everything else, we might not be the first group of people they call for help. We kind of went through the obviously the protests, the defunding and everything else. I mean, the goal is our community has to be able to trust us, and that when we show up that we're going to do the right things, and just being able to introduce ourselves, in the complex. It happens to be Officer Roach's neighborhood. That's her reporting district that we're working on. But this is also the same complex that the young man had accidentally killed himself. So there's other kids in that home that have seen that have been exposed to that. It's just trying to show that, hey, if not saying it would have, but if there was potential that someone in that apartment complex had trusted us enough to call us before that happened, when they saw something that was wrong, we may have been able to prevent that day. So we have spent time out there. Shortly after that, we've gone out, we did the ice cream, we talked to the kids, the officers spend their time out there. We're always looking for ways to connect with certainly the underserved part of our community. And when we reached out to the Latino Leadership Council for the holiday program, it was just one more way of trying to reach out and build that trust.
Great, thank you. I just like Councilmember Amara, I would also be interested in the statistics on closing cases or cases that lead to arrests of investigations. I'm just kind of curious. There's been lots of kind of talk about how many cases are getting closed, and I don't have any answers for that when I get those kind of questions. And then the last thing I have is in regards to what kind of went on with the whole nation. There's been a lot of talk about de-escalation and de-escalation processes, especially around mental health. And so I know you had talked about possibly getting a part-time social worker to come and work for the city. What is the city doing to work on those de-escalation processes and make sure that we have something in place around that?
Sure. So through our police officer standards and trainings, we're required to go through so much training every 2 years, and that's one of those areas. But given the climate that we're in, the officers, the staff here went through the de-escalation as well as bias-based policing around July to talk about those things and how do we better serve. So that's one component of it. Yes, to have advocates who are experts in the field of the mental health side of it would be a great resource for us, and not just to deal with the homeless, but to deal with a lot of the calls that we're going to. We're actually, we are working with part of our community on how to, kind of this part of our group is the community is actually doing their own research on the mental health response here in Placer County. What does that look like? All the way from when it happens through the first responders, through Health and Human Services, and everything else. We got to find a better way of providing that service. And it's not just one, it's not one or the other. It's us being in partnership with Health and Human Services, with our mobile crisis team, because, like we talked to this group earlier today, actually, and the thing about it is the cops are doing great work. We hear about the most prolific ones. And the question is how many times has the system potentially failed that individual? And what you're seeing is someone at their wit's end. And had we been able to get to this person earlier and get them the help they needed, then we may not have had the same result. Very much like we're talking with the mental health and kids using pills. We've seen that in our region. We've seen the fentanyl deaths, kids using pills. The question is, why are they using the pills? That is a mental health issue right there. And, I think a lot of people want to look at this stuff as it's all or nothing. It's not just about sending advocates and clinicians to get these folks some help, but it's about taking kind of, an all hands on deck type of approach, and knowing that we all fit in different parts of the pie. Those folks that are experts in mental health issues, they went to school for that. Can't expect the officers to know everything and all about every mental health issue. Educating our community on what information we need, as we respond to these calls. And it even helps in reverse if families would even educate us, say, hey, look, my son or daughter or whomever was, suffers from this. So when we show up, at least maybe in our records, we have some of that information. The officers would be educated before they get there to know. And so when we get called, we're getting called when everybody is at their wit's end. We're not getting called when it's the low level stuff, when the family can handle it. They don't call us, right? They'll call whomever. But as each situation escalates is when we start intervening there. And, like we told this group, our job is to make it safe. And that's what we try to do the best so these individuals can get the help that they need. So we are, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd had a question from somebody before. If somebody has someone in their house that has a severe, autism or a mental illness that makes it so they act out and could get a police call, is it better for them to call you ahead of time and let you know that individual is in their home? What's the best way to deal with that?
Yeah, they can call us and let us know that, their individual, their son, their daughter, whomever is living there. And these are some of the issues that they might be having, right? This might be their mental health component to it. And you bring up autism, we went through, we actually had a group come in here and teach the officers response to those who are on the autism spectrum, and how best to handle it, because we're always learning new stuff. We won't turn away training and opportunity to better serve our community, and we've done that as well.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleagues for all of the very thorough questions. I am down to just one question that I didn't hear anybody else ask, and maybe this is more clarification for me. On slide 19, Chief, you talked a little bit about the animal control component of things. And I was trying to recall, I tried to find some reports, or excuse me, some staff reports from a few years back, but I wasn't able to put my hands on them. We contract animal control services out to the county. I recall the issue because the county fairly significantly raised the rates on us a few years back. So when it comes to animal control, are our officers dispatched if there's a dog terrorizing a neighborhood or an animal that's trapped in somebody's yard, or are those calls going directly out to Placer County?
So the answer is, so when we get that call, we actually go to that call. What we contract through with the animal control shelter is the shelter services. And so when we take an animal, a dog or a cat, to the shelter there, that's actually what our funding is paying for. Now we'll be paying for the dogs and the animals, the length of time they're staying there, the services that the animals might need. So a lot of that goes into that cost that we pay on an annual basis. There's ways, so I actually just met with the staff there at the animal control shelter. It's a beautiful facility if you haven't been out there. But the way that we kind of, again, adjust our the costs that we have with them is, ensuring that, I know is ensuring our animals are licensed and that they're registered, make sure that their vaccinations are up to date. If an animal gets away, that people know that their animal's there. The longer that an animal is there in the shelter, those costs go up. And what the county has done there, I believe it's a 3-year average, is how they come up with those costs. So the way we reduce that is by our community. Again, anybody with animals is engaging in that process better. They have a high number of success rate there at the animal control shelter, getting animals adopted and or back to their owners. So that's what we're paying for, to answer your question, is the actual shelter services right now.
So I had an incident here at my house many years back, and we called APD or dispatch. There was a skunk that fell down. We have a sunken trampoline in my backyard. A skunk fell down underneath my trampoline. And when I called and said, "Hey, I got a skunk under my trampoline," they thought I was crazy because, well, it'll just walk away. Don't worry about it. And I said, no, it's like down in a hole. It can't get out. And APD did show up. They walked back, they looked, and are like, "We're out of here." I mean, well, there's nothing we can do. So so in a situation like that, do they have the equipment to be able to extract the animal, put it in a cage, and deal with it?
Mayor, I'll be honest, this is one of those systems that needs to be addressed, and we need to actually have more of an appropriate response to that. Like I said, half our animal control is our other part-time, is our full-time CSI property and evidence technician. So if she's not here, we don't have necessarily the tools to do it. And yes, potentially the officers would have to go down there with the snare and get the skunk from the sunken trampoline and try to rescue it. But they're not trained in the animal control response either.
Good news, Chief. I grabbed a long 2x4. I sloped it down underneath the trampoline, and the skunk got himself out of his predicament. So all was good at the end of the day.
Very nice.
Thank you again, Chief, for the very thorough report. Thank you again to my fellow council members for all the very thoughtful and thorough questions. Again, most, except for that one of mine, were all answered. So thank you. Appreciate it very much. And without further ado, we'll move on to item number 10, which is our financial assurance for post-closure maintenance and corrective actions at the Auburn landfill via pledge of revenue agreement. And I'm guessing, Mr. Dunleavy, you're going to take this item?
I am, but how do you follow the skunk under the trampoline story?
We had so much fun waiting for the officer to show up because he's thinking these guys are idiots. I mean, the skunk's just going to walk away. And we're like, nope, it's right down there. Check it out. It was funny.
All right. Well, I'll try and equal that. Mayor and Council, tonight staff is requesting you to approve a resolution providing for financial assurance for post-closure maintenance and corrective action at the Auburn landfill. This is going to be through a pledge of revenue agreement with the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. As the council is aware, since 1978, the city has owned a landfill that was closed about in 1984. With that, there are a number of requirements for closure and post-closure maintenance on the facility. Fast forward to 2017 and 2018, the city and Recology, our operator, entered into a new waste discharge requirement, or a WDR, with the Central Valley Regional Water Board regarding that site. The site has a number of issues that happen out there. Most notably is that there are some instances where there is some of the old waste that is in contact with groundwater during certain parts of the season. Tonight, what staff is asking is that the council authorize staff to submit the attached resolution and go ahead and execute the agreement with the regional board. This is a requirement that was actually required last year, but the regional board has kind of given us a little bit of a break, given some of the staff turnover and the things that have been happening. The report details some of the expenses, and I'll go through those. Right now, we estimate that the ongoing, the three components: the maintenance, the reporting, and the maintenance, reporting, and the sampling that goes on out there. It comes out to about $166,000 a year right now on average. This year, it's some years it's a little more or a little bit less. This year, it's more a little above $300,000. What staff is recommending is that as far as financial assurances go, the regional board requires that we identify a funding source which approximates the revenue needed to do the ongoing reporting and maintenance on that. Right now, within the structure of our franchise agreement, the city sets aside about 6.3%, and that comes out to about $228,000 a year, which would suffice for the regional board's pledge of revenue agreement. From tonight, it's really pretty basic. Staff's asking you to do the resolution. Staff will put together a letter which will be transmitted to the regional board regarding this. And I think there's probably an agreement that they would require us to enter into. This is all pursuant to the WDRs that we have on the facility. And with that, I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that the council has.
Thank you, John. I see Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo's hand up quickly there. So, Alice?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John. I appreciate this. And we've been able to have the opportunity to talk about this at length. Something that just came to my mind really quickly is that although both of us are on the WDR, Recology, and the city, they don't have to be named in the financial assurance. That's just us.
You know, in this case, it'll be both Recology and the city.
Okay, so we're going to both be on that financial assurance then.
In this case, both the city and Recology are on the permit. So in this case, it's who the permit's issued to. And it's both of us.
But we're the ones that are putting forth the revenue. You know, the actual financial assurance isn't coming from them. That's our pledge of revenue. They're not pledging revenue. That's us.
Correct, but it's within the structure of the franchise agreement that we have on things. So
Okay.
by having the 6.3%, that's part of the rate structure. And as you're kind of alluding to, where does the revenue come from? Realize that as we move down this path regarding mitigation and other projects that we're going to have to do, ultimately it will come out of the structure of the rate. So in this case, we're identifying and pledging the revenue that we have consistently been putting forward. As we move down towards other types of mitigation and corrective actions, it will also come out of the rate.
Well, I appreciate that we have the opportunity to use a pledge of revenue for our financial assurance because, there are other very costly means by which to provide that. And I'm glad that we're able to at least do it that way. So thank you very much. That's the only question I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from council members?
A comment whenever that's appropriate.
Yeah, let's see if we have any other questions. I do have a couple of quick questions, John. In the staff report, the corrective actions are identified as fairly modest as to where I think they might end up as we kind of work through this situation. Do we have any, I'll call them guardrails on what potential costs might be as far as impacts to our rates for trash collection in our city?
Well, the answer to that, no. There aren't any specific, governors on how much comes out. The number that is presented to you tonight, the 166, 335, where we think things will go is the environmental staff from Recology along with the city consultant are the ones who have come up with that. Now, as we move forward, I'm just being very frank with you, they're going to go up significantly higher, but that will get into the mitigation requirements required on the corrective actions.
And those rates, and this is maybe back to Alice's question, those rates, well, those costs for the corrective actions are going to be split between Recology and the city? Or is Recology handling that stuff and we've got to adjust rates to help them on their end? Who's I mean, we're doing financial assurances here tonight, or we're being asked to. Is Recology also required by the regional board to post financial assurances?
No, in this case, no. We're the owner of the landfill. We are on the permit. We have the structure under which these things are funded. So the bottom line is that the city is responsible for this.
But as you and I have talked at great length, we entered into a franchise agreement with Recology, and part of that agreement included them taking over operation and maintenance of the closed landfill. So we're now, our ratepayers, our community is now solely responsible for this. And I'm not suggesting that anything didn't go the way it should have gone. I'm not suggesting, the maintenance wasn't adequate that has occurred for the last 40 plus years, but this, as you alluded to, has the potential to be a significant impact to our citizens' costs for garbage pickup. I guess I'm curious, what financial contribution does Recology have in this situation?
Well, within the context of certain aspects of the operation, Recology does pay for those. And as you've kind of described, Recology is responsible for the maintenance out there. There are some costs that the city has to do, some of the costs that Recology is obligated to. So there is a split of some of the costs that go on out there. Ultimately, the city's the owner, And in this case, we've worked with Recology to identify the costs. And as far as the financial assurances, this is really part of our obligation of this thing.
So our consultant is Terry James with JJA. He's still actively engaged and involved with reviewing all of this stuff, and these costs seem appropriate based on your understanding, John?
He is. The task that I gave is we were kind of narrowing down because we have to get this agreement with the regional board done before the end of the month. Terry James, along with Stephanie Kendall from Recology, were both tasked with coming to the agreement on this. So we're very confident with these numbers.
Okay. I guess my last question is related to the kind of ongoing costs and the potential for increases. When do we think we might have an understanding of the actual cost to do whatever corrective measure might be necessary to clean up some of the pumping and different things that are going on out there on an annual basis, with some of the water that's getting into the landfill itself? Is that something that we're going to hear about in 6 months, 8 months, a year? Because it has the potential to be a significant impact to our citizens and our community. And I guess I'd like to have a better understanding of when we think we might know with more specifics as to what those costs might look like.
Yeah, I would say that probably some of this will start to boil within the next 6 months.
Okay.
There are basically 3 routes on this. There's an incremental route of mitigation over a number of years. There is one option, which is a new cap that would go on, which is a combination of geometric fabric and a dirt layer, for lack of a better way of describing it. And then probably the ultimate option is what they call a clean closure, which is actually going and excavating the entire landfill and moving it someplace else. So each one of those has a different trajectory as far as cost and time and all those types of things. Where it sits right now on that, Recology has a firm that's going to come on to help work up the 3 options in the estimation of costs on those things. So those will all come in. Obviously, a pretty extensive financial analysis needs to be done, and that'll all be presented.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Appreciate your responses to those questions. Let's go to Councilman Riddell.
Thanks. Matt, you covered a lot of what I was going to comment on. I've been talking with John for a couple of weeks about this, and that I'm very concerned about the emissions and the water quality coming out from the landfill, that there's no liner in there because it's so old that it's going to have an impact on groundwater and things. And so I'd really like to see not only just an estimate of what it would cost to clean up, but also that versus the estimated costs of continuing how we are now. Because I know there's probably, all my work in the environmental world has said that all of these costs are just going to keep increasing exponentially, and there's going to be more and more regulations that are going to get put in place. And so there's going to be a break-even point at some point where if we would have cleaned it up now, that we'd be saving money and we wouldn't have to keep increasing rates and keep increasing rates. So I want to make sure that we're thinking longer term with this and planning, so that way we don't have to get stuck with this kind of around our necks forever. And I'd like to see what it would take to do a full cleanup, and also whatever partials. But if we're going to spend $5 million on a new cap, there has to be a break even for cleaning it up
that doesn't require us to do all that work.
Thank you, Rachel. Councilmember Lamb.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a follow-up. My understanding was that this wasn't necessarily a cleanup that's a one and done type of thing. This is a change in the requirements of the permit, correct, John? So these are to mitigate the issue is obviously what we're focused on, but if the Water Control Board comes back and changes again the parameters of the permit, then any effort that we put in, even on the front end to clean it up, is potentially a liability in the future. Is that correct, or am I misconstruing this a bit?
Well, so the cleanup, well, whatever mitigation needs to be done is going within, realize that we still are pitching to the regional board regarding what we're going to do. Because at the end of the day, they've got new regulations. Quite frankly, they don't want the groundwater in contact with the old trash that's out there. We are discharging. There's a lot of different things. And, how we are going to deal with that is basically within the scope of the negotiation with the regional board. This is, Councilmember Del Harris is right. There are long-term, short-term costs as far as how we address this. And ultimately a clean closure is going to ultimately have the problem go away. But there are risks and rewards of the various things that we have to do. So all of this is all going to be coming back, and the council will be able to see that, but it'll, like I said, there's still a negotiation with the regional board on all of this.
But again, John, I'm still not completely grasping what you're saying. I was under the understanding that under the previous permit, we were in complete compliance. Under the new permit, there's new guidelines, new rules. And so that's what we're back to negotiating now. And I guess if I'm very much in agreement that if we can do some preventative work and front whatever quote cleanup needs to be done. But I just, again, I'm under the impression that it's kind of this continue to raise the bar of an issue, not we've let it go for 20, 30, 40 years without cleaning it up type of situation. That in reality, at this point, the groundwater underneath is in compliance with the permit that we've had for decades at a time. It's this new permit that they've issued with new requirements that we are currently discussing. And so back to trying to fully clean it up, is that really obtainable right now, since we really don't know what the requirements will be in 10, 20 years?
Well, you're right. Did they change the requirements? They did. And in practically every landfill of this type, most of them, this landfill was basically a breath away from being closed. Typically, the duration is like 30 years out. Did they move the bar? They did move the bar. And that's part of the calculation we have to figure out is what we do. Are they going to be able to move the bar again? And they could. They absolutely could. And depending on what we do, even the idea of putting another cap on there, part of the discussion is a little bit of back and forth on what that cap would look like. Is it satisfactory? Is it going to go down? Because the cap that is on there right now was satisfactory at one time. It was. Doing the estimation of whether they're going to move the bar, come with more regulation is absolutely there.
I appreciate that, John. And that I think helps answer my question. And I'm all for if there's things that we can do on the front end here to ensure that we're not just in compliance, but at the end of the day, none of us want to have contaminated groundwater, regardless of if the standards change and there's better science that makes it even safer. I just wanted to ensure that our community understands that we've been good stewards of that landfill and that it wasn't until here at the 11th hour, after doing everything we were told to do, that there's these new parameters, the rules have changed, and now it could cost us greatly. And so again, not diminishing if there's something we can do to spend money, as was said, $5 million now versus over 30 years to ensure we're kind of out of this business. But I just want to make sure that those who may not be as familiar with the city's landfill understand that it's not like Recology or the city has just been sitting back allowing trash to seep into the water, because that's just not the way to characterize that effort. So I too, like Councilwoman Riddell Harris, look forward to seeing if there's something we can do to help us not just be in compliance with this permit, but make sure that we're pushing back appropriately on the control board to ensure that they're holding us to a fair standard that's reasonably obtained for a small city our size with a budget that we have where we can only staff 2 police officers and barely 1 fire station to be on the hook for millions of dollars for doing everything we thought we could do. In fact, now not even being in that business is just not an acceptable position for this city to be in my opinion, in the future to come. So thank you, John, for the clarifying questions.
Councilwoman Amaro is next.
Thank you. I just have a comment. I'm just going to echo what Councilwoman Raquel Harris indicated, and I would agree that we should at least get an estimate with regard to how we can clean this up once and for all. And it sounds like we're going to be facing issues in the future. Laws change and become stricter, and if there's something we can do, it'd be good to have an estimate. Not to say we haven't done a tremendous amount, but we certainly want to make sure that our community is safe with in regard to the groundwater. So that's all my comment is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a point too, that it's not just that that things are different with the permit. To be honest with you, when the WDR got opened up again, it should have been the city that was negotiating with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and not Recology. So there are some lessons that have been learned here. And I think that John and I have discussed this, and we really need to be on top of this moving forward. I used to work at the Integrated Waste Management Board, so I'm very well versed in landfills and caps and all kinds of liners and so forth. So, it's very unfortunate the way that this has come down. And it's very unfortunate that we've got the new requirements that the Regional Water Quality Control Board has placed on us. But, again, I look forward to further discussions on this. Tonight, our item really is just the approval of the financial assurances, which is the first step. It's the first requirement we have. To Councilman Berlant's point, unfortunately, the Regional Water Quality Control Board doesn't care that we don't have sufficient funding. That is not something that's in their on their checklist, and it's sad, but it doesn't matter to them. I know that. I oversaw them too in the governor's office. So we're in a difficult situation, but today we're taking the first step that we need to take with regards to having these financial assurances. It is a requirement. We'll move forward and we will continue our discussions. But really, for our residents, this is a huge issue. And it is not something that the city did on purpose. There was no intent. We were in full compliance, but unfortunately things have changed. And now we find ourselves in the situation we're in. And we're gonna have to address it and make some very difficult decisions coming down the pipeline. So, and I'm not looking forward to those discussions. But in any event, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And whenever we're ready to move forward to take action, I'll make a motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, one last question. In the staff report, there's table number 4. It talks about the costs that I think are outlined in the staff report for post-closure maintenance, and it has a total annual cost of $166,000. Then it's got a 30-year multiplier. The new WDR, did it extend the permit out for another 30 years after all the years that we've already had? Is that the correct way to read that?
You know, I'll have to get back to you on that, just as information back to you. I don't, the WDRs are not, it's not like a 30-year WDR. I know that they come up for review but I can get back to the council on that, but I can tell you that it's not 30 years for the WDR.
And I guess the follow-up clarification that I'm going to need to take action on this tonight is that we're certifying financial assurances if we move forward on this item for $166,000 per year and $335 for corrective actions. So is this action a total of, what is that, $492,000?
So the amount that we're assuring in the resolution is 6.3% of the franchise revenue, or of the franchise fee that comes in. That comes out to about $228,000. That's to cover the $166,000 that is identified in there. We've added in the $335,000, which represents the amount for this year, but realize that we are currently doing a lot of other things that are associated with the maintenance and reporting, because eventually you get to a point where you're simply just maintaining. At this point, we are very actively working with the regional board, additional reporting and additional costs that are going into it. So at the end of the day, the amount that we're assuring is the 6.3% of the revenue, which comes out to $228,000.
And not that it's much of a delta, but you're referring to the 6.03% that's currently set aside in rates that are paid to Recology, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And you know what, if I can just, the updated resolution, it's 6.3%. It's not 6.03, it's 6.3%.
That's in the reso?
It is, but it's 6.3%.
So I'm sorry, John, to be nitpicky here. I just want to make sure this is correct. I'm looking at page 123. It's the reso that goes along with this item. The now, therefore, be it resolved, the first, second, third paragraph down says 6.03. And again, I know that's a difference.
And it should be 6.3.
Okay. So I will probably want to correct that with any motion that's made for the council if we move forward. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
We collect more than that for the franchise fee, right? That's just a portion of the amount that we collect. What's the total amount that's collected? I'm just curious.
Total, we do. Okay, and this is 6.3 and
you can get it to me later. It's not important for this, but it just, I know that there's a portion that we collect that doesn't go into the landfill, and I was just.
Correct. I have it, and I will get it as a follow-up to the council, but I'd like to say that we collect, I don't know, Gary, do you know, is it 15% on the franchise fee?
I don't think it's quite that high. I think it's just shy of that. I think it's about 14%. So
John,
there's
I'd meant point to you to the
Oh, there's something in the
from
chat.
Ecology in the Zoom. Tisha from Ecology saying it's 10% for franchise, 6.3 for landfill.
all right. So it's
So that was
previously
16 total?
14 because the landfill closure fee was increased in late 2019.
Okay. All right, we're, I think, all done with our questions. I'll ask, Alice has another question.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to clarify for the purposes of the record. We don't have groundwater contamination at the landfill. We had, there were some issues with regards to some monitoring, but we don't have actual contamination of groundwater. So I just want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you.
We do have trash in contact with groundwater. So that's the issue.
Yes, but it's different than a contamination of groundwater supply. So, I mean, there are
Yes.
issues that happen. So I just want to clarify that because our folks that are watching this may not understand that difference. So thanks.
Yeah, it's just we have to pay money to have that be true. And so if that isn't the fact, then we don't have to pay all that money to deal with that issue.
Yeah, just a really simple way to put it, we're not polluting. We have issues with water that comes in ground in contact with some old trash. We actually extract all that water and we discharge it. And to even make it simpler, if we wanted to, I'm very sure that we could just pump it across the road to the golf course and they could probably water the golf course with it, out at the Ridge Golf Course. So we are not polluting.
All righty. Hey, Amy, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Thank you. With that, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, you had added, I had mentioned I would be prepared to make the motion, but then you said there was something we had to update and I was writing something down when you said what that item was, it had to be updated.
And Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the reso talks about 6.03%.
That's right.
Or is it 6.3?
It should be 6.3, and it's the third paragraph indented following the now therefore be it resolved. In the first line, it has the number 6.03%. It should be 6.3%.
And does the approximate dollar value have to be updated based on that minor change?
It does not. It does not.
Okay.
The dollar number is correct.
All right, so then Mr. Mayor, I will move by resolution as amended to reflect the appropriate number that we provide financial assurances for post-closure maintenance and corrective action at the Auburn landfill via pledge of revenue agreement with the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board.
I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments from council? None. Good. Amy, you want to go ahead and call roll?
Councilmember Berlant,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Spokely.
Yes. We had a council member about 45 minutes ago asked for a break. So I'm going to forego our reports. We'll catch up on those at our next meeting. And John, we'll catch your city manager's report then as well and call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Great meeting. Lots of great questions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Everybody.
Good night.